we've seen is now every single time where Max gets this frustrated, he ends up not only not winning the race, which I don't think he was going to anyway, but he ends up throwing away positions, getting himself in more trouble, causing himself more issues, getting penalties. The thing is, that situation with Lewis Hamilton could have easily gotten him a 3-place grid penalty for the next race, along with the fact that he may need to take penalties for engines.
We are rolling.
Yeah. Because I want to see if you remember the name of the podcast.
Oh yeah, what was it?
Yeah.
Of course it was the Breaking Bias podcast.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Blatantly Biased Racing Podcast. That's the name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For once, yeah.
Anyways, look, we have a lot to talk about this today, and I think first we need to start with one very important question. Has Joe Biden done to Donald Trump what Nico Rosberg did to Lewis Hamilton?
Oh, that is the big question, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Yeah. We should cover that for an hour and a half and then get to Formula One, I think is the only.
I mean, what happened afterwards? I mean,
America
there are so many similarities.
America has become a reality TV show.
Parody. It's basically a parody.
Yeah, it's. I think what was it? I know it's not F1 related, but it is interesting that Donald Trump, I think, posted something basically saying that the Democrats should now reimburse him because of all the money he spent trying to fight Joe Biden. And I'm
basically trying to malign Joe Biden, and now he has to malign Kamala Harris.
Yeah. So I'm like, so you're annoyed that you basically tried to insult someone for 9 months, and now you have to insult someone else. It's like, why not spend that money putting yourself up instead?
That doesn't work.
Yeah.
The whole point.
That's
in
the problem.
That doesn't work.
I guess the problem is because it's working, it means that it is us as human beings that are the fucking problem, as always.
Yeah.
Well, Americans are the problem. Sorry, America.
I mean, I can extrapolate to. I'd rather keep my mouth shut. I want to live a happy life.
Let's be honest here. It's the same problem in India, Ireland, Mexico. It's just
place.
Worldwide. Yeah. So people should just focus on F1 because people don't get annoyed about F1, right?
At all. I mean, so peaceful. By the way, just now I saw Heinz Harald Frentzen actually posted a tweet where he compared Max Verstappen's lunge on Lewis Hamilton, and he compared it with Michael Schumacher, Jacques Villeneuve's lunge on Michael Schumacher in Perez 1997.
The one where they collided and he won the championship basically off that, right?
When Villeneuve won and Michael tried to, I think it was basically an intentional collision. That was he intended.
Michael got disqualified for that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And as usual, one fan base pretty much erupted and abused the hell out of him.
I can't imagine which fan
deleting
base.
The post.
I'm guessing the Max Verstappen fan base went crazy, right?
No.
I know. Yeah. I'm joking.
Yeah.
No, we'll talk about that incident.
We'll talk about that,
I have some thoughts on that are going to piss off both fan bases. But anyway.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, everyone is going to be pissed off this time around. Everyone.
This podcast,
if
you're annoyed during this podcast, can you subscribe just to let us know, please?
Yeah. Or just drop a comment as well. We'll take that as well in the bargain.
Yeah.
I mean, just for keeps. Is actually the situation between Biden and Trump similar to what happened with Rosberg and Lewis? Because
you actually wanted an answer on this.
I mean, look, there is. Biden beat Trump, and before Trump could actually go back and level things with him, he's dropped out. So forever it will be 1-0 in favor of Biden. And again, in case of Lewis,
I get what you mean. But the problem with that is Trump would have had to have won twice beforehand because Rosberg was.
Yeah. I mean,
it was 2-1, realistically.
It was, but the moment when Rosberg beat Lewis was smarting. He wanted to beat him in 2017, and Rosberg didn't even give him that opportunity.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's something for another day. We have so much to talk about.
Yeah. I love it. We have this much to talk about, and your decision was to start with that. Yeah. All right.
I mean,
cool.
Catch everyone off guard.
Yeah.
And this certainly, Anyways, again, Hungarian Grand Prix. Wow. I think the first thing I actually want to say is, and again, this is something for all Formula One fans, leave aside any kind of fandom. appreciate what you are watching right now, because this will not happen again.
You say that, but it did happen. This is the second time it's happened.
What I mean is, these 18 months until the end of these regulations, this is probably one of the better times to be a Formula One fan. Enjoy it as much as you can. Please keep the toxicity away. And seriously, you don't enjoy this period, in 2026, one of these teams will be ahead. And again, one of these drivers will win, and they'll be called legend or whatever you want to call them. But during this time, everyone will make mistakes, and I'm repeating this thing. Everyone will make mistakes. So just enjoy the ride. And I mean, that's just a very small appeal.
Seven different winners this year.
In 13
and not
races.
one of those is Sergio Perez.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Christ.
I would have touched on it later, but again...
We'll touch on it. We'll get back to that later. But yeah. He's gone
Anyways,
after the next race. Let's.
It seems like it. I mean,
We'll talk about
nothing.
it. Where do we begin? I guess McLaren.
Let's start with Lando. Lando, Oscar, McLaren. I mean, let's start with that. Again, let's start with the very first question. Let's hear your view. Did Lando Norris actually do the right thing? I mean, let's hear what you want to say, and then I'll tell you why you're wrong.
Well, I'm sure that we have as well. I know some people did submit questions, so hopefully I don't answer those before we get to them, but we will get to those later in the podcast. Okay, here's my thinking on this, because straight after, and actually during the race, on Twitter, I specifically said that this is not the action of a world champion, right? And I do kind of somewhat regret that, because I think I can see why it was actually the smart option. And I think there is two kinds of world champion as well. I guess you've got the Lewis Hamilton type, the Prost type, all these kind of the world champions who maybe think things a little bit longer term, and then you've got the Vettel, Verstappen, and Schumacher types, and Alonso even types, who kind of think in that moment for that race only, and their constant thinking is, if I win here, that's all I have to focus on, and then I'll win everywhere. So I think I need to backtrack that, but let me get to that point. So I still kind of think that Lando was wrong to give the position back, and I think he should have put his foot down and basically told McLaren to go fuck themselves. And the reason I think that is that in a different situation, it would have been completely different, right? So if before that undercut, he had have said, right, or he had have been told by McLaren, we're going to give you the preferential strategy, but you'll have to give it back to Oscar later on. If they had had that discussion before he did the undercut, it would have been completely different. It would have been his decision to go, okay, fair enough, I agree, I see where you're coming from, you're trying to cut this off, let's continue. And if he had said no at that point, then it would have been a different situation where it would have been like, right, well then Oscar's getting the preferential strategy and we'll continue on there, right? But that wasn't the situation. They just called Lando in, Lando got the undercut, he happened to be ahead, and then he pulled away massively, and on merit was going to win the race, right? Yeah. The thing is, there's a lot of people who will say that Oscar Piastri won that race at the first turn, right? Basically he got ahead at the first corner, and that's where he won the race, and Lando threw it away there. But by the same logic, that undercut wouldn't have happened if Oscar Piastri hadn't have made the mistake in the stint before that and gone off the track, seceded a lot of the time difference he had, and in that case he would have came out even 2 laps later ahead of Lando, right? So to say that Lando or Piastri kind of won the race or lost the race here, you could make an argument that Lando lost it at the start but Oscar lost it in the middle, so realistically that's out of the way, right? So the basic point I'm getting to is, if they had this discussion before the undercut, right, before the pit stop, as Lando rightly said, if you had said that to me, I would have said, I'll take the undercut or I'll go long, but it would have been my decision. At which point you would have said, okay, fair enough. If it didn't work out, then you say, okay, I'll give the position back. But McLaren pushing that on Lando is the point where I think any other world champion would have said, no, fuck you, I'm not doing this, because you've put me in this position and you've basically now put all of the emphasis on me to make a decision as to whether I give up the race. Like Verstappen would have said, no, why didn't you tell me this before the pit stop? I would have said, no, I'm not doing it. Vettel, we absolutely know because of Multi 21, would have said, no, fuck off, basically. Or would have said nothing. Sorry, radio's broken. I'm not around. And Schumacher or Senna, for example, other two drivers of the past, there is not a hope they're giving that back. I know you're going to talk about, say, Lewis Hamilton. Was that 2018? 2019? I can't remember which. 17 was it? But the difference there was, if I remember correctly,
It was
Valtteri
P3
let...
before.
Yes, and if I remember correctly, Valtteri let Hamilton by thinking he was faster, and then they re-inverted it later.
Yeah.
And that is my exact point. If it was that situation where they said, look, we're going to give you the undercut, you're going to be ahead of Piastri, but you'll need to give the position back later. And Lewis or Lando had said, okay, cool, whatever. Or if, basically my point is you can't just give that situation to your driver and then expect them to fall on the sword for you. And I think realistically, it's another situation where McLaren, even in a 1-2, completely fucked up. Because what McLaren should have done there, what they absolutely should have done there was, Oscar went off the track. They should have either given Oscar the preferential strategy of giving him the undercut, or when it didn't work and Lando was ahead, and Lando pulled away, to be fair, and he said, if he can catch me, he can have the position, which I think was a perfectly reasonable thing to say. McLaren should have got on the radio to Oscar and said these exact words. Oscar, sorry, we fucked you on strategy there. That's our bad. It won't happen again. If you can catch Lando, we'll see if we can get the positions inverted, or we'll get the positions inverted, but you'll have to catch Lando. Basically, you went off track. You lost the position. We fucked you on strategy. If you can make it, we'll see what we can do. But that was on McLaren.
Leave that aside. Just focus on Lando. Did he, keeping everything aside, what McLaren should have done, everything aside, considering the situation where he was, did he make the right call?
I think he did, but I only think that now after kind of going through it again, because I think the situation he was in is, if he didn't give that back, he then is fucked by McLaren and Oscar repeatedly, I think, over the next season and a half when he's likely in a title fight. But I think it's completely unfair that he was in the position to have to make that decision in the first place. So yes, I think he was right to give it back. But I think that other drivers, say a Vettel or a Schumacher or any of those, wouldn't have, because they wouldn't have seen it as this is the smart thing to do in the long run. They would have just seen it as, you guys fucked me, I'm not giving it back. And so yes, I think he did the right thing, but I think he shouldn't have had to make that decision, is the simple way to put it.
Yeah. Okay, just to correct, just something I actually think Vettel gets tagged into this whole thing very unfairly, because the reason why Vettel did the whole thing was Webber had not been a good teammate for him at any point in time. That was the main issue.
Whereas Piastri has been.
Piastri has been very good in terms of being a very pliable, and that's where the whole narrative changes at that very point, because Vettel was quite clear about this, because in 2012 Brazilian Grand Prix, if Webber had just ceded the position at the start of the race, Vettel would not have been involved in all the mess and would not have been forced to do the recovery drive.
Yeah.
And he had it in his mind. That's why he did the whole thing. Before that, things used to be fine. In 2010, 2011, there was still a bit more cordial the way the two conducted. Again, in case of Michael or Ayrton, they were number one drivers. They smashed everyone. And there was never the argument was not even there. For me, the whole thing comes down to a very, very simple fact.
Just quickly, Michael as well did show that he fucking hated these team orders as well, because was it on
Austria?
Was it Barrichello? Was that what it was? Where basically was it Barrichello? Wasn't it?
Yeah. Austria 2002, where Barrichello gave up the position,
and he swapped them around on the podium. Basically,
the whole thing happened, and
he kind of was like, no.
By the way, Michael did the same thing back for Barrichello in Indianapolis that very season, just to pay him back.
Yes, that's why I was getting them confused. I was thinking America, but yeah, you're right. It was where they swapped around.
Again, but the point is, if Lando had not done that, whatever he did in terms of ceding the position, he would have been in a position. Let's assume he is currently around 70 points behind Max, 75 or 76, something like that.
It's 76, I believe. Yeah,
76. So somehow let's assume the next race Max crashes out. Something happens. Lando, by the grace of God, basically wins the race for a change, and he ends up decreasing the gap to Max. At that point in time, going into the summer break, Lando will have two things going by his side. First of all, right now McLaren owes him. Whether they say it out loud or not, they owe him.
They owe him
Second,
big time for that, yeah.
Yeah, big time. Oscar owes him as well because Lando could have easily screwed him and he could not have been able to do anything.
I kind of felt sorry for Oscar as well, but we'll get to that. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll get to that as well. I agree. I did. The Now at this point in time, from this very moment, again we'll have 14 races in the first half. There will be 10 races in the second half, and in the second half, Singapore is a race where Red Bull is fucked. It will be the fourth fastest car easily. I have no doubts about it. After this weekend and seeing how they tackled the curbs, again they proved to be the main differentiating factor. I have no doubt that Red Bull is fucked in that particular race. You have Singapore, just add a couple more races where things don't go Red Bull's way, and the championship could be on. Again, I'm being very hopeful here. It could be.
I'm starting to think, man, that any race where it's not all about straight line speed is going to be a race where McLaren should be either alongside Red Bull or ahead of them. It's
Possibly.
Kind of looking that way at the minute.
Yeah. And in that situation, Lando needs Oscar by his side. He needs him as his deputy. And the thing with Oscar is he's brilliant over a lap, but over a race distance, he's still... There's a slight step where Lando has the edge. And again, it didn't work out here. It will work out in the long run.
Yeah.
He can... If Lando had screwed everything up, being a petulant child here, he would have ultimately lost everything in terms of a backing of a teammate who actually backs him. He has been pliant in quite a few situations. Even last season here only, he was quitty. He didn't really make much of a fuss when Lando was given the undercut. And even in general, even the team backs Lando a lot. Zach Brown loves Lando, and Zach Brown has been after Lando. And again, the team knows that Lando backed McLaren. He had the opportunity to go to Red Bull and other teams, but he has backed McLaren all these years.
Yeah.
Now he finds himself in a situation where the team and the second driver owe him.
This is why
this will make a difference.
Yeah, and this is why I changed my mind after kind of reviewing it, because when I was watching it, the reason I said he shouldn't give that back and why I said this is not the move of a champion was just purely because in my brain, immediately I went, McLaren fucked him here because there was no conversation about this before. That was the main thing for me. I was like, if you have this conversation and then you don't give it back, you're a prick. You don't do that. But when there's no conversation and then they throw it on you and you've been faster after, like, it's not even just the undercut. After the undercut, he also pulled out a massive gap. So he was the faster driver in that stint. Now, whether, this is F1, there's tons of ways you could look at it. Like if he was behind Oscar, we could get into all of that.
He would not have, if he was behind, he would not have overtaken
dirty air,
Oscar.
all of these different things. Yeah, so you could say all that. But the point was, I just think at the time, I was like, McLaren screwed you here. They should have, they absolutely... And I still stand by the fact that McLaren shouldn't have put him in that situation. But I do 100%. Think he did the right thing because of the way he handled it, because there was the conversation publicly, there was he held it out for a long time. He pulled out a massive gap, and then kind of 2 seconds before, or 2 laps before, very visibly kind of dropped back and let him off.
The thing is, I think 6 seconds he pretty much dropped in a lap or something like that.
I think, F1J, the guy on Twitter, posts some funny stuff.
He's hilarious.
He posted up something of, it was like, why did Norris not immediately spray Oscar? Like, is there some tension there? It was like kind of alluding to that.
Yeah.
He said it in a funny way as always, but my response was, no, he was just giving Oscar 5 seconds to pick up his champagne and catch up. But yeah, like the point is, like, I think he did it that way to the point where they're going to owe him even more now, because even McLaren says, like, okay, you've made your point, like, you're quicker. Can you just please give it back? And we'll get onto why I feel sorry for Oscar, because that must have been, I think Oscar, by his radio message as well, was very like, fuck's sake, like, this is not how I want to win a race.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Norris did the right thing in the end, but I still think McLaren should have made the call after the undercut to Piastri and just said, look, that's our bad, I think that should have been it. I don't think they should have put Norris in that position. I think that was a really, once again, fuck up by McLaren there, big time.
And exactly, and again, just turning the page, now what ideally McLaren should have done in this case. I'm personally of the belief that McLaren still thinks like a midfield team.
Yeah.
I felt that in their strategies, in the way they have been... You don't see the kind of boldness that you tend to see with a Red Bull or a Ferrari. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Sorry. Have you done what I've done, which is just pretend that Ferrari post 2009 just doesn't exist? So you're thinking Ferrari team orders in like the early 2000s when it was just like
for my mental health, I prefer to think that
way.
Yeah. It's just. And again, the man that is actually responsible for all of this, the head of strategy, Randy Singh, whatever his name is.
Is he Indian?
I've been trying to reach out to him on LinkedIn. Problem. Yeah. I've been trying to reach out to him on LinkedIn to get an interview. No response. Anyway, so if Randeep, if you're watching, please respond.
After I just said that's the problem, I don't think he's coming on this podcast.
I'm still. In case you have a change of heart, regardless, I think the biggest problem was why did they actually pit Lando? Because the moment they pitted Lando, when Lando
they
came
knew
out,
the undercut
he had
was
a
strong.
4-second advantage. Even when Lando came out, he had I think 4 to 5 second advantage over Lewis. So I think that's a massive buffer that they kept for no fucking reason. The lap that they pitted Oscar, they could have easily pitted. The lap that they pitted Lando, they could have easily pitted Oscar. On the very next lap, they could have pitted Lando.
Yeah,
it was.
I get why they did it. It was conservative.
Mistake proof. You don't want to be in a situation where the pit crew is in. They have to deliver a 2 to 3 second pit stop. You don't want them to be in that situation, but. Do it better. I mean, or either just get the drivers on board first. Because for me, that's all they had to do. Precisely. For me, the dumbest thing was, let's put Lando Norris in a situation where he has to actually concede a win.
That's it. That's all they had to do. Was they could have just easily said, Lando, listen, here's what's going on. Oscar had an off or whatever, So if we pit you for conservative strategy reasons, we're going to pit you first. This will give you the lead, but we want to invert the cars afterwards, for fairness.
Ideally,
at least Lando could have said, no, I'll go long. And then they say, okay, Lando, if you go if you go long, there's a chance you will lose the position to Verstappen or Hamilton later on. And then it's completely on Lando. Lando can say, no, give him the better strategy. I'll go long and try and win this. Let us fight it out on track. McLaren go, okay. And then if they fuck it up, it's on Lando then. And that's, that's my whole problem. It's like you can't make these decisions and then put it on the driver. It's like McLaren was in
such an impossible position where, and again, I have to say hats off to Lando. I think his name is Tom Stollard, his race engineer. The kind of again, it was almost begging the level to which he had to fall to.
It was so bad.
Yeah, but honestly, he said all the right things. If you look back, he said everything perfectly. Because I think we did an article on this on Sportskeeda. His radio was, you cannot win championship alone. You need the team. You need Oscar. Once he said that, on the very next lap, Lando did it.
Yep.
And again, you need that kind of relationship between a driver and a race engineer. Big
credit to
McLaren. What the fuck?
Big credit to the engineer and to Lando, I think, because it was a really difficult situation. Lando was in an impossible situation as well, because you'll have pricks like me saying not the move of a champion afterwards, like I did, right? And if he doesn't cede the position, then you'll have pricks going, oh, well, Lando's not a team player. So he's in an impossible situation, right?
I think I've not understood one thing. When the fuck did Lando become the villain of Formula One?
This is, you know what? This is one of
it doesn't make sense.
one thing, because he said some bad things about Lewis, right?
Then he's competing with Max. So basically, the two biggest fan bases are against him.
Yes, and then I think
it's nonsensical.
The problem is as well, he winds people up a lot. Like, he says things that we would say on Twitter to wind people up, and people don't. He's not actually the villain. You just got these two loudest fucking annoying parts of each fan base just continuing.
Seriously.
That's all it is. There was someone today who literally, I think just before I got on the podcast, and this is one thing I do want to say, anyone who gives out about Lando being upset after that race can go fuck themselves, because the people who are complaining about Lando being upset, like one person was like, is he really putting crocodile tears on after, as Oscar's winning? And I went into the account because I was interested to see. It was a Leclerc fan, I think, who literally was like giving out about everything that anyone's done to Leclerc. And I'm like, are you telling me that these people who get annoyed on Twitter about any single situation wouldn't be bawling their eyes out if they were in Oscar's situation or in Lando's situation? Like, of course he's going to be frustrated. Of course he's going to be pissed off. Like, in the cool down room, Lewis said, oh, you guys were quick today, right? And people went off because Lando's response was, oh, well, you were quick here like for 7 years. I'm sorry, but Lewis has responded like that a few times as well. If he's just gotten out of a car where he was leading the race. He was told to give it back. He was in an impossible situation. Of course he's going to be frustrated and pissed off. And anyone,
you have to understand this thing. At some point, look, there is this, it's unfair. Honestly, it's unfair. There's no winning for him. If he does not give the position, he's an asshole. He is not a team player. If he gives up a position, he's not going to be a world champ. There are very two things. And then, how can anyone not expect him to not be upset? When he did the whole thing with champagne, he did not spray it on Oscar, because I can understand. I can completely understand. On his part, and I think even Oscar understands this thing. Oscar, the first person who actually congratulated him was Lando. So Lando did his bit. But you can't really expect someone to not be angry.
You can't expect him to be happy in that situation.
Yeah.
Like, you just can't.
Yeah. That was just rubbish.
Look at Lewis in 2016, right? Now, I know this is a championship, but this is my point. Drivers after that situation, it's like any human, when you're in a situation, this is why road rage exists, right? Your adrenaline's pumping, you're pissed off, people get annoyed at the smallest things. Like Lewis in 2016. So is it a case of the better man won? And he was like, oh, I didn't say that. And then, like, while he was in the car, it was like, Lewis, this is silly now, whatever. And he's like, I don't care, I'm losing a championship right now. Like, even drive, and Lewis is not that guy out of the car. Like, he's a pretty reasonable, nice guy. Of course, when the adrenaline's flowing, you're going to do and say stuff like that. And the fact is, Lando later on, as things you could see him kind of cooling down later on. And that's when he came together with the team and said, I was always going to give the place back. I think that's bullshit. I think he thought about not giving it back. Of course he did. But, like, I think the problem is people just...
Honestly, I can't fault him for anything. Right now,
he's been a class act this entire time.
Like, anyone who thinks Lando was being immature when he was in the cool down room, you're a fucking idiot. You don't know that kind of emotions. What he was going through at that very moment, you cannot.
We haven't talked about Max yet. Vettel said it. Yeah, but Vettel said it. Vettel said years ago, if you were to mic up if you were to mic up a football player, do you think everything they say would be nice? Yeah. Of course not. Like, precisely. Anyone who criticizes Lando on Twitter for his frustration yesterday,
honestly,
subscribe and then go fuck yourself.
Yeah. Honestly, it was very facetious. That's my 2 cents on it. Anyways, we're done with the Lando thing. Yeah. One thing I actually wanted to talk about was McLaren. Oscar. We'll get to Oscar as well. First, McLaren, because I remember last season, as soon as Andreas Seidel left, when he announced that he was leaving, and then we had James Key also left just soon after. And McLaren was basically a backmarker for the first 4 or 5 races. It was a backmarker.
Yeah.
It's almost, I think, 15 months. And in that time, we have, let's be honest, McLaren is the best team in F1 right now. In terms of pace, in terms of driver lineup. there are no two ways about it. What a turnaround.
Yeah.
What a turnaround. Without any Adrian Newey, without any such star designer, or even honestly without any star driver.
It turns out all they needed was that wind tunnel. Remember, for years they were like, when the wind tunnel comes online, that's when we'll be a front runner, and everyone was like, including myself, the wind tunnel's not going to fix anything. Well, I know that's not the only reason, but it is funny how wind tunnel comes on. Yeah.
And you have to, at some point you have to understand this thing, that the kind of setup that McLaren has right now, it's not a very traditional way. As in, there's not a singular technical director and then people below him. It's more of a, you can say, flat structure, and that is working.
It's like the matrix structure that Newey didn't want. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar.
I mean, it failed spectacularly when Ron Dennis was there. We remember it happening.
Yeah.
So I always have a few trepidations when it comes to that. But the fact is, they're the only team that have actually unlocked and finally understood the entire ground effect era. At this stage, if McLaren brings something, probably out of all the teams, I'm the most confident in them that they will actually, whatever they bring, it will actually have a positive impact in terms of performance. Which is very impressive.
The decisions they made over the last kind of 18 months has been incredible, because essentially last year they brought the upgrade to Austria, I think it was, right? Or was it before that?
Half of it in Austria, rest
and then Silverstone, right?
Yeah.
Like, they brought that, right? And then they had this huge uptick, and then they kind of fell off over the second half of the season. Remember, not that they fell off, but they didn't continue kind of progressing as we expected.
Yeah.
And I think it was really indicative of where we've gotten to at McLaren and why I'm so impressed, because I think they could have continued bringing upgrades, and they could have come in to January February of 2024 this year with straight away a very fast car, right? But I don't think they would have been fighting the way they are right now, because they made a very clever decision, which was they basically said, we've got a very fast car, but it's very peaky. It's only good at certain tracks and it's difficult to drive. And they basically said, let's focus on that instead of just pure performance. And it essentially gave them a situation where they didn't look like they were, it looked like, oh, that was a nice flash in the pan. Red Bull's going to run away with this for 2024. And they switched off and they said, let's just focus on this area. And now they've come back with a fast car that is fast across everywhere, and also is very comfortable for the drivers to manage, which means that the tire wear is above even Red Bull at the minute. So that decision was just, I think that's where Andrea Stella has been just spectacular. It's that kind of calm, collective, we'll just push in this direction. And Red Bull over the last 18 months has kind of been the opposite, where, it's... I don't want to say they've gone wrong, but there hasn't been that kind of everything's under control feel with Red Bull. It's been kind of the opposite of that. And Ferrari's been kind of similar to Red Bull, where it's been, oh, great, oh, what the hell? Oh, great, oh, what the hell? And Mercedes, likewise, has had that kind of up and down. And it's only McLaren that has felt like, we've got our direction, we'll take our time, but we'll get there. And it's paying off. It's paying off big time for the team.
I mean, I still remember, because when I started watching Formula 1 in early 2000s, most of my friends from that time that actually still follow the sport, they are all McLaren fans. And in 2021, I had actually said that I think McLaren might be the next breakout team. Because the way it was operating, it was a very gradual growth. It wasn't a case of team basically throwing everything and then whatever sticks and boom, we're up.
Yeah.
After 2021, things didn't go their way in 2022. They were there or thereabouts, but they dropped to 5th. But the way they've recovered, you have to tip your hat. And I think Zach Brown bringing those many sponsorships and stuff like that, look, it has helped the team, because this is not the McLaren of old where money was never a problem. Right now, it's state-of-the-art facilities, but a lot of it has been supplemented through sponsorships, not through the money from the Middle East. A part of it still comes from there. It's still people don't know that McLaren is actually a Middle East.
It's Bahrain, no? It's Bahraini owned.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's a topic for another day.
Do you think they're going to be quickest over the rest of the season now? Apart from high speed tracks, is what I said.
apart from high speed tracks. So what I think it was Martin Brundle's son. It's Alex Brundle, I think. Alex Brundle did the whole onboard for in terms of comparison between Max and I think it was Max and Lando. And at that point in time, what came up was there was only one place where Max lost time, and that was the very harsh curve that they have to navigate in Sector 2. That's where he lost. That's where he lost the pole position. So almost every track where that is going to be a concern, he's going to lose positions.
Yeah.
And other than that, I think it's still going to be neck and neck.
See, this is the thing. I think it's those harsh curves are obviously where they lose the most time. But it seems like McLaren is pretty much on par in every other type of corner, and it's only the straights where McLaren just hasn't got it. Like McLaren's just not very fast in the straights. The deficit's not like wildly wrong, but it isn't the fastest in the straights.
I'm still not sure if that is the case, honestly.
I guess we'll see at Spa.
I mean, they won in Miami. Miami is basically a lot of straights, and
actually in Austria they were fighting for the win, so. I guess we'll have a definitive answer at Spa, won't we? That's going to tell us exactly what the case is.
Yeah, but McLaren was
the chicane
at Spa last season as well.
Yeah, and the chicane, the bus stop chicane is going to be a problem for Red Bull.
For Red Bull, yeah. But again, it's almost a 2-minute lap, so there are places where Red Bull can make gains.
Yes,
I think it's just again we'll get to Red Bull later. For now, at least, the constructors championship is on. Around 51 points is the gap. Red Bull's second driver shit show, we'll talk about it, but I think for now the constructors championship is definitely on. There's no doubt.
I think there's I would almost say it's now McLaren's to lose.
Are the favorites.
Yeah, because I just can't see a situation where Max on his own can beat that driver lineup. And one of the questions, actually, because I just had to flick through there to see what the questions were so that we can kind of maybe answer some in line. Coffeehead said something, and this brings in the Oscar part as well. But Formula Coffee on Twitter said, "Is this the beginning of the Orange War?" And I think for the reasons that we just talked about,
I think the Orange War he refers to which orange is he talking about? I'm so confused. Well, there's so much orange at the.
He had a couple of questions about Max, but he said, "Is this the beginning of the Orange War?" I'm going to take that as McLaren. Because there is no orange
papaya.
Yeah, but it's orange. But I just mean like there is no war at Red Bull, is there? Unless he means the eternal war. I guess we'll talk about that. But just answering that question, I think that, and before we talk about Oscar, if he does mean McLaren,
Lando
I think
versus Oscar.
Yeah, But I think realistically now, Norris has probably got himself in the best situation with Oscar because I think after yesterday. Him conceding that position probably means now there won't be a McLaren war over the rest of the season because, as you've said, Oscar and McLaren now kind of owe Lando big time because Oscar didn't, but McLaren really fucked him there, so they really owe him. So no, I don't think it's the start of the Orange War. I actually think yesterday is probably going to be the thing we look back on as the key reason why McLaren absolutely destroy Red Bull in the constructors for the second half, because they'll have two drivers who are perfectly helping each other the whole way through the season now.
The second thing is I think it's more or less clear now that even in Hungary, again, there are few who think, Mark Hughes has actually put out this point that maybe Oscar was just managing his tires in the final stint, and that's why the gap grew as much as it did. But I don't think that is... I have doubts regarding that because even in the later stages, when Lando gave up the position, he was still right behind him and he was trying to do something that would have been pretty epic.
It would have been interesting if he had passed him. Yeah.
That would have killed Oscar, by the way. All the confidence gone, everything done.
Because it would have been he gave up 6 seconds, gave you the lead, and then took it back.
And then took it back. By the way, that would have been something that a Michael Schumacher or an Alonso would have actually done to the teammate. I have zero doubts about it.
The thing is, I think the moment that team order had came over, I think Alonso or Schumacher would have argued with it for 5 or 6 seconds. But if they ever had given it back, they would have given it back earlier and then gone on a mission to take it back.
Yeah,
I think Lando
100%.
giving it back 2 laps from the end was kind of conceding that I'll give it back and we're going to fucking talk about this later. Like that was kind of that. Because if he wanted to take it back, I think he would have given it up kind of 10 laps before.
Yeah,
because he had
precisely.
enough time to kind of
100%,
ponder that out.
100%. That
Talking about
not have
Oscar, I feel so bad for Oscar there because, like, let's look at the negative and the positive here, right? The negative is Oscar surely didn't want to win his first Grand Prix that way. I don't think any driver wants to win their first Grand Prix that way.
I'm
sure he's happy that he's won.
Me, right?
He just, I knew that Oscar's first win wouldn't be like a yeah, because that's not Oscar. But I was expecting a bit of a laugh, a bit of a huh, great guys, well done. Like, you know, can't believe.
Yeah.
But it was like, yep, cool, good work today, guys. There was no excitement
Everything was
in the
taken
voice.
away.
And I think if the team had said, like I said earlier, we fucked up Oscar, we'll give it back, like we'll fix this later in the season or something like that, I think Oscar would have been happier about it. But I think Oscar kind of, as soon as there was that,
I doubt it.
I don't know though. He just
driver
didn't
is
seem
going
happy.
to be happy. I mean, he wasn't happy for only one thing, because Lando basically showed that Oscar was not on his level. That was why Oscar was not happy. If you're able to pull out a 6-second gap, I mean, that's a statement, right? That's a statement that you are not on my level.
Yeah.
And the team radio also said that you've proved your point.
You've proved your
And it
point.
did.
Yeah.
And it
yeah.
did. Which is again, look, the best part. I think there are two ways you can look at this.
The negative though is if McLaren had have just given him the undercut, I think
it would have never
I
happened.
don't think Norris would have passed him on track, because as soon as he got in the dirty air, it became very difficult. So I don't think it would have. And also, I think at that point, if Norris was behind after the second pit stop, and even if he caught him, I think that would have been a different situation where McLaren would have said, "Can you hold position?" And it would have been an easier conversation, where I think Norris in that situation would have said, "Yeah, fine," and been like, "I fucked it up at the start. It's on me," you know, and that would have been a usual. Anyway, yeah. Can we just say the positive though is it seems like Oscar has somewhat fixed his tire management issues, because that is a
lot.
That is a difficult track on tires, and there was no. I know Lando pulled out the position at the end. I do think some of that was down to Lando just fucking red rage annoyed, just went on one more. So
No, that's true. That's true. I mean, all of it is true. The best part is Oscar is growing. And again, these are skills that you acquire in due time, and he's doing that. The problem that Lando might face in the future is the very same thing. Oscar is growing. He's getting closer and closer by the week, pretty much, I think every 2-3 races you see the gap decreasing, and at some point Oscar will start beating him. And if that happens in 2025, Lando has an in-house competition, and if you look at this race, McLaren is not going to go for a number 1, number 2 kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's where things might start.
They might
boiling
for the
over.
rest of this season as a kind of making it up to Lando. But I think for next year,
I mean, for
definitely
now, it
not.
doesn't make any sense, right?
No.
They're not really Lando, at this moment, is not fighting for a title. Unless something happens in the next 2 races.
Can I
he's
just...
not fighting for a title.
I think they should be focusing on it that way. Because, I mean, there's still 10 races. That is most of an old Formula 1 season, right? And as we saw in this race, as we'll get to, if Max is under pressure, the cracks start to form in Red Bull with Max, right? So I think they should be seeing it that way, because
I don't think Max was under pressure this weekend, honestly. We'll get to him later.
We'll get to it in a minute.
Something,
but I think that Norris, it's 76 points, which is a huge gap. But that's only it's 2 races where, like Singapore, or if there's Singapore and then a race where Red Bull DNF with Verstappen, right? All of a sudden,
Singapore, Vegas, they are 2 races, and maybe what's that one? Abu Dhabi. These are 3 races that Red Bull might struggle with the curves.
So, but if you say right, and then if you say even if there's 2 races,
wait a minute. Monza as well. That's 4 races. With
so the point is, right, but even if we just forget about it, if Max has 2 races where he's not in the points for any reason, right, which could happen, like,
Yeah, of
you know,
course.
so like this is Formula One. It's not a done deal that the engine won't blow up on one of these tracks, right?
Yeah.
In Spa, the other thing that's going to be a difficulty in Spa is while I think that Red Bull will be the fastest in Spa, Max is likely going to take his engine penalties there. So Max could be starting from the back.
Oh shit!
Right?
I completely
So-
forgot about it.
Yeah, so like the thing is, that could be, say, 50 points immediately. Just all it takes is 2 races out of the points where Norris wins. And I think Norris now is going to be on a mission to win as many as possible. I think he's cleaning up a lot of those cracks. And McLaren are having their Red Bull 2009, where the mistakes are being made, but they are, I think, just like their car development, they will learn from them. They will seal up those cracks, right? So that, say, is 50 points. Then all of a sudden, like a 26-point lead is easily over 10 or 8 races, let's say, like 7 points in a couple of races, and all of a sudden it's right there.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's over, and I think McLaren should treat this as a title fight, because one, it could happen, and even if it doesn't, they should be fixing every crack now, treating it as a title fight, because if 2025 happens, they're going to have 2 drivers in that fight, and they're going to have to be absolutely on it to the point where within 3 or 4 races, they're going to have to make their decision about which driver gets preference here. They're going to have to make that decision.
True.
Because otherwise they'll end up with a 2007 where even though they have the fastest car and the best lineup, another driver like Max is just every weekend, you know.
I'm telling you, they're going to end up in that situation anyway. They're
Where Max does a Raikkonen in 2007 and just kind of, you've got the two really good drivers in the fastest car.
Yeah, I have no idea where Max's head is at right now. Because, anyways, I mean, we've talked a lot about McLaren. Let's move on to...
They will have the best driver lineup in 2025, though, I think.
Who? McLaren. Ferrari has Lewis and Leclerc.
Yeah, but Lewis is just getting there, and there's a lot to deal with. So I think...
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you're talking about pure just talent, I agree. You could say that they're probably fairly close. But if you're talking about... like,
I'd say... Look... On talent, I'd tilt towards Ferrari because, again, Lewis Leclerc
but if you're talking about like the team gelling, you're talking about a situation where Mercedes and Ferrari, at the very least, just those 2 teams, will have 2 new driver lineups to contend with. Yeah. So that puts McLaren in a situation where they've got 2 really good drivers that they then know how to handle after this year. You know what I mean? So...
Yeah. I think, again, look, as I said, and at the start of the podcast, great times ahead, at least until the end of 2025. Great times ahead. Yeah, look, we have
Cancel
so
2026, please.
Yeah, screw that. I mean, just another, what was it? What we had in 2020, where we ended up having the whole regulations shifted for another year.
Imagine 2021 might not have happened. Imagine that. Like, if COVID didn't happen, 2021 would have just been the 2022 season.
Maybe COVID was a boon for Formula 1 in some way.
Basically, I am glad COVID happened because it was made up for by Formula 1. How many people died in COVID? I probably shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, you shouldn't have. Oh, God. We're actually making light of it. Anyways,
let's put that on the bingo card. Yeah, moving on.
Quickly. I mean, yeah, we've been quite, you can say, well behaved this time around.
I think so, until that point, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, moving on from this, let's talk about well-behaved drivers. Max Verstappen.
Should I read? One of the questions is. Have we got a couple of questions here?
Yeah, we've got a question from Bobby. I mean, we'll get to it a bit later because that will fall more in line.
Let's get to that. We can get to the first one, I think, from Coffeehead, right? Who said one from Coffeehead who says, "Could Max win this race if he was calm behind the wheel?" And is Red Bull too dependent on Max as well? Probably falls into that.
Yeah.
You go. I ranted about McLaren first, so you rant about Red Bull first.
And you'll say, and you'll actually confirm how correct I am. Yeah. I think no. I don't think Max could have won. I think there was a chance that he could have won if he kept his head in place. But I think the biggest problem that I felt was just. Look, Red Bull, if it cannot take the curbs correctly, I really don't see a point how it can compete with McLaren over a race distance on a track like Hungaroring. It hurt them every time, During the first stint, you could see how Max was falling back. Maybe there was scope. Yeah, remember when Max tried to move around Lewis? It was, I think, the second around turn 2 when he just went straight on. If he had actually made that move, there was a chance that he could have actually cut down the gap on the two front runners because he had the edge in terms of pace. He could not do that. That hurt him. But overall, I don't see him having the pace to, either perform the undercut or have the pace differential that he can actually overtake both of them on track.
Yeah.
One thing might have happened actually if Max had got the jump on Lewis, Lando would have won the race because no way was McLaren asking Lando to drop 6 seconds to get back to Oscar. No way was that going to happen. That was just out of the picture. So I think Oscar should thank Lewis for basically helping him win the first race. But yeah, I really don't see how it was actually going to happen. First, what's your take on this? We'll talk about the second question later.
Look, I think McLaren were very much in control of that race from start to finish, and like we saw Norris get past Max anyway. You know what I mean? So
no. I mean that was through. He let him through, right? He let him go.
Oh yeah, sorry. Jesus, there was so much going on. I just completely forgot about the whole first lap incident. Yeah, so we need to talk about that as well. Jesus, sorry. I just in my head went, Norris overtook. It's like, no, he gave it back. I completely forgot about that. Yeah, so we'll talk about that in a sec. The question, just to focus on this question, no, I don't think he was winning because realistically, I know he had to give that back now, but McLaren's pace was very much kind of in control of this race, and I think Max could have got a podium. I think he would have beaten Hamilton. If he was calmer behind the wheel. If he was calmer behind the wheel, I don't think he would have taken that lunge. We'll talk about that incident in a minute because I know I blame both drivers, so look forward to that one. But yeah, I think a calmer Max wouldn't have done that. And I know they fucked him with strategy a little bit. I know he was annoyed about that, but not enough to win the race, in my opinion. So no, I don't think a calmer Max would have won that race. Personally.
Yeah, no, me neither. Second question, by the way, again from Coffee Head. Is Red Bull too dependent on Max? I think we touched on it a bit last time around. Remember we talked about it? And yeah, the answer is yes. And for that very reason, I'm very hell-bent on who they actually sign for the second driver. By the way, there was an announcement during the race weekend that Helmut Marko's contract has been extended with Red Bull Racing, so he'll be with the team until 2026. And
so Max will be with the team till 2026.
I mean, they're saying that, but again, contracts are not worth the
contracts are like hearts; they're made to be broken. Yeah.
Precisely. Again, but they're saying that actually makes a difference. I don't know. The point is, it's they need a stronger second driver. If yesterday the kind of nutcasery that okay, first let's talk about this. What the fuck was Max doing yesterday in the race?
It's just... So I got given out to because I said Max needs to work on this because I gave 2 points on it. I said, one, I don't think we should berate drivers too much because I understand the frustration, adrenaline. The car is not where it needs to be. The team is making decisions they shouldn't be. The upgrades are not working. They're not going over the curbs. I understand all of the frustrations that Max has right now, especially given he is a driver who I have compared to Schumacher in the past, who wants every single fucking weekend to be perfect. So I completely understand the frustration. However, Max does need to work on it, and that's what I got given out to for saying by a couple of people when I said he needs to work on this because it's childish. Because what we've seen is now every single time where Max gets this frustrated, he ends up not only not winning the race, which I don't think he was going to anyway, but he ends up throwing away positions, getting himself in more trouble, causing himself more issues, getting penalties. The thing is, that situation with Lewis Hamilton could have easily gotten him a 3-place grid penalty for the next race, along with the fact that he may need to take penalties for engines.
Like, in that case, it wouldn't have mattered. Maybe
probably not. But my point is, it might have put him in a position where he just had to take the penalties at that race because he already had these are the kind of things that ruin a championship. that like we saw this in Jeddah in 2021 where Lewis did some terrible things as well, but one terrible thing by not seeing someone braking in front of him, which seems like they don't train people at Mercedes how to do that.
By the way. But anyways, that phrase is in the past.
The point is, it's just this anger over the radio. The frustration is understandable, but it shouldn't be happening. And the people who basically said that, he doesn't need to work on it, Max was in the right. I'm like, these are the same people who, when Yuki throws a tantrum like that over the radio, people are like, Yuki's not responsible enough. He's not grown up enough to be in the Red Bull. So
I think I'm slowly growing, trying to understand this concept that maybe all fans are hypocrites.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the whole thing.
I think most fans, I think me and you are in a weird position where neither of us are particularly fanboys of one driver. I think we both have drivers we like and drivers we're not a huge fan of, like Lance Stroll, for example. But neither of us are massive fanboys. And I think the thing is, no offense to any fanboys out there, but you always should really, when you start getting annoyed about a driver doing something, maybe think to yourself, is this because I just don't want to say anything bad about my driver?
Precisely. I mean, that's just, it's, if you have to be a fanboy, you're going to compromise a few gray zones. That is what happens every time, and I mean, it's very evident right now.
Also, it's fine to be a fanboy. I don't care.
Yeah, do that. It's fine. I mean, it's okay.
It's entertaining.
We love that. I mean, I love that. But again, I mean, look, I've been branded a Lewis fanboy recently, which was very hilarious. Not only by you, but others as well. So, which was quite hilarious. Again, look, you have to understand one thing. And again, first of all, talking about Max, I think there's one concept that he actually has to understand now. And that concept is that the days where Red Bull was as dominant or everything was working perfectly, those days are gone. One more thing, I think one question for you. The 2021 version of Max Verstappen, where do you think he would have finished yesterday?
I think the 2021 version of Max Verstappen probably would have DNF'd in that race, personally.
No. That's where I disagree. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. The biggest reason was the 2021 Max Verstappen drove what was possibly the best car he had ever driven in his career. At that very moment. It wasn't the perfect car. It wasn't the best. Maybe at times it wasn't the best car. But there was a very clear mission that he had in front of him, which was he was going to maximize every fucking race and he was going to get that done.
Yeah.
Right now, the car that Max is driving, he's had better. That's why he's basically throwing quite a few hissy fits, which is, again, let me make it clear. And that makes a lot of difference.
I get what you're saying, yeah.
And the 2021 version, who would keep his head down, who would try to, I think he would have finished P2 easily. I have no doubts about it. He could have done that because the biggest thing that he would do is
P3. I would agree with P2. No,
P3, P2. The reason why I say P2 is because again, McLaren was doing their own shit show in front. So that was going to play a role.
Yeah.
And again, what Max is going through right now is he's driven better cars. He's driven in a more comfortable situation. Right now, he's not in a comfortable situation, but there's also this thing where McLaren has developed, Mercedes has developed. He's just come from a race in Silverstone where Red Bull was possibly the third fastest car. He made a difference and he's been making a difference in a few races quite fairly. And again,
he is the difference maker. And
without a doubt.
Look, Max is still, I think, until Norris or Piastri can consistently kind of make sure they're on top of things, I still think Max is the best driver on the grid at the minute.
I think Max, when his head is not basically banging against the wall,
that's why I think he needs to work on this, because that race was, like I said, that race was a comfortable third position.
In the bag.
Yes.
Worst case scenario, third position, without a doubt.
Yes. So, but he ended up fifth because he was throwing a tantrum. Yeah. I have no doubt about that. A Max who was calm with his head down would not have locked up diving that into that turn. He would have ended up third position. He would have tried to go for it, maybe aggressive as usual, but he would have controlled it into the corner and taken it, or he would have backed out, waited till the next position and taken that. He had the pace on Hamilton, so he would have finished
easily.
So
and that is just, again, it's a level of there's this thing called expectation setting. At the start of every season, every driver tries to, after the preseason test, they try to set their expectations that this is how I expect my season to go. After the first two races, Max was winning by 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Since then, things have changed, and they've changed drastically.
Massively, yeah.
He's panicking, and he should panic. But at some point, you have to be very... There's a level of pragmatism that needs to be here, because if Adrian Newey, after the very first race, or just at the car launch, he said that the teams are going to close the gap. And that's the reality of the whole thing. The teams are going to close the gap. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to happen this soon, but it was expected by almost everyone. The level of prescriptiveness of these regulations were going to lead to something like this. Now, at this stage, if he continues to throw tantrums, he can do that. He's not going to make any new fans out of this. The factory is still working flat out. There's no doubt about it. The operations team, I have zero doubts about it. It's arguably the best operations team throughout the entire grid.
He needs to be... He can't afford to have these tantrums, because realistically, if we get to a point where McLaren bring like another upgrade, right, and get to the point where they are at every track consistently the ones who basically will lose the race, right? So it's up to them whether they lose the race or not. Essentially, the position that Red Bull was in the past, where Red Bull was the fastest, and the only way they could lose is if they threw the race away.
Yeah.
McLaren could see themselves in that position, and in that situation, like, they've got two good drivers, and Max has no backup at the minute, right? So he needs to be in a situation where he goes into every race calm, cool, and as he always said, just trying to get as close to perfect a weekend as possible. They need to be thinking in, when there's a chance to win, I will take it, and when there's not a chance to win, I need to limit damage. What happened this weekend is there wasn't a chance to win. Red Bull's car wasn't in the right position. Yes, they made some strategy errors, but then he threw everything away by getting angry and getting annoyed. And if he had just finished in third, I think the thing for me is, if Max had finished in third at this race, my answer earlier to, is there a title fight, would have absolutely been, Max will just damage limit this the whole way through. But because of the way he acted this weekend, my brain is now thinking, there is a chance that Max could just have two bad weekends where he gets in this situation and it ends in DNFs, and all of a sudden Lando is right in that fight.
Yeah.
And that's what concerns me about the way Max acted. And I think, I'm sorry, Max fans, but he needs to work on that, because he cannot win championships in that mindset right now.
And just to point one thing out, a Michael Schumacher would have never done this.
Mm-mm.
I've seen him have his red mist moments, but they've usually been off track, when he ran after David Coulthard, but he would not have done it on track. And again, there are a few that will point that he will crash his car or something like this, but that's for another day.
The thing about Schumacher that I think people forget in those situations, when he's crashed his car, that hasn't been because he's annoyed. That has been a calculated, strategic decision where he thinks, I can crash, take them out, and win this and get away with it. That's a very Senna-esque thinking. That's not that's not Max annoyed over the radio crashing because he's focused on being annoyed. That is a strategic, like, I'm going to cheat to win.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have said cheat, because I know that'll piss, but you know what I mean. Like that.
It's fine. The point is, and again, moving on to one more thing, the whole interaction with GP. What's your take on it? For me, the biggest problem was it got abusive, and it sounded like two basically husband-wife nagging at each other.
Which is always them, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it is, but it went overboard in terms of there was nothing. I mean, the entire weekend, as soon as Max missed the qualifying pole position, everything he said, he was annoyed. Every time he was annoyed. The only time when he wasn't, when he was in his sim race and everything that he was doing away from track. It's just...
I guess we should talk about that first lap incident first, because I just want to say, because I think there was a... No, we'll just answer this question quickly, I think, both of us, from Bobby, because this kind of lines up to where we were just talking about, which is, do you think Max is as good wheel to wheel when under pressure as people think he is? I think the simple answer to that is yes, But there is a little asterisk on it, which is it depends on how you define under pressure. Because when Max is under pressure and he's focused and he has his head down, that is why I think he's still the best driver on the grid at the minute, because he is absolutely spectacular, won't give an inch. And every other driver knows that, and that's why Austria happens, because they know he won't give an inch. And they have to put themselves in those positions and not back out. Because like Senna and Schumacher, he won't give an inch. However, the asterisk comes from, it depends on what you mean by under pressure, because when he's under pressure and he reacts the way he did this weekend, no, he's not.
I don't think he was under pressure this weekend. He was frustrated.
He just lost his mind, I think.
And
again why I put the asterisk, because it depends on what you mean by pressure.
One thing you point out, Jos Verstappen was in the garage this weekend.
Of course he was. What was he? Was he in the Red Bull garage though, or he was in the Mercedes garage?
Both. There was this video of him and Christian Horner standing side by side. I'm like, wow. I mean, this is never going to work.
Yeah, that man-child.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know if that played a role or not. I think this weekend was very similar to what happened in Singapore 2022, where basically Max lost his head already in qualifying on Saturday. He went on a road rage. Again, he was spectacular in Singapore until he kept the car on the road. But other times he was making mistakes that he ideally wouldn't.
Yeah,
that's the same thing he did here. There was no point. Again, Max has nothing to be pressurized about. He can simply come home in P3 almost every race and he'll still win.
Yep.
That the car is still good enough to do that.
Yep.
It's not pressure. Pressure is AD 2021, last lap, Lewis in front, fighting for the title, and he pulls out a move at a point where no one expected it.
Yep.
That is pressure.
Yeah, hence why I say
pressure.
Exactly why I'd say yes, but it depends on what you mean by pressure. So
precisely. Precisely. And again, pressure would be Saudi Arabia 2022, him and Leclerc battling the fuck out of each other and him coming out on top. That is pressure. This is not pressure.
Look, he's an incredible wheel-to-wheel racer. And this is, again, this is what kind of annoys me about fan bases sometimes that are a bit
by
too...
the way, think about Bobby. Bobby is a huge Lewis Hamilton fan, and he kind of... He possibly sent out the tweet trying to abuse me or something, but... Again,
that's fine.
That's
To be honest, I can kind of see why he says that, though, because it is questionable when you see weekends like this where, like I said, Max threw away a guaranteed P3. So you do have to ask the question, like, he threw it away in a wheel-to-wheel battle that he shouldn't have been in. So again, this is why I can see why Bobby is asking the question, but I disagree that he is I think he is a really good wheel-to-wheel racer, one of the best, if not the best at the minute, under pressure. But again, it just depends on what you mean by pressure, because if his head's not down, it's so the question I have is, when we talk about this, like, all of this stemmed from literally that first corner, because from that moment was when GP's response, I think, basically set Max off on one, like, immediately. And from that point, he was kind of, that was it. Like, this was, because
he went through my memory. What did GP say?
So he went through the first corner, obviously. He went off track and then was asked to give the position back, right? Max said, he forced me off, and, basically said that. And GP's exact response, I can't remember the entire response, but the first line was essentially, I'm not going to go arguing with the other teams and the FIA. Max, just give it back.
No. He did this response. Wait, was this response for this one or for the Lewis collision?
No, I'm fairly sure it was for the first one. I'm fairly sure. If you want, I can look it up while we're talking. But I'm pretty sure it was for the first one.
Because I actually covered the whole thing. It was, Max, this is childish. It's childish, something like this. And GP said it for the when Max said that Lewis moved under braking.
Okay,
I remember him saying that.
I thought it was from the first one as well.
I think it was a bit terse in the first one as well. I'm not entirely sure the whole thing started with that. I think it started with Max basically punching the steering wheel when he didn't get pole position. And somewhere I feel He was ticked off because the upgrade was supposed to work and they didn't. And then he came out and said that maybe quite a few members of the team are not on the same wavelength and they need to get serious and wake up and something like this. So he was a bit pissed off already that the upgrades have not worked. And from that point onwards, he had the start. Again, by the way, I'm still not sure if it was the right decision or the wrong one. Whatever I've seen, because in Austria, we see this quite often. I can't find
the messages, by the way, just to
that's
say,
all right.
So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Even in Austria, if you remember, the first corner is a bit weird, where drivers tend to go off and use that line to actually come back on track. How do you adjudicate something like this? And how do you even judge which car is up front in this particular
The thing
scenario?
is, the reason I think that basically Red Bull... So... I think he should have given the position back or got a 10-second penalty, right? And there was a few people on Twitter who basically said, Max shouldn't have given that back. He was forced off track and whatnot. My simple argument was...
He was forced off track, but the point is what... I mean, he was. Where else was he going to go?
Yeah, but he made that decision going into the corner, like straight away.
It was the result of the Oscar Piastri dive bomb, right?
But the two of those were alongside before they even got to the apex. So he knew.
Is it?
Like he knew the two of them were there, right? So he knew that was happening. So he decided to swing it around the outside. And the thing that makes me convinced he wasn't pushed off track, it was the way he braked and applied the throttle. Basically was he knew he was going to take the wider line and keep... So
he made up his mind.
The thing is, regardless, I always argue this with Hamilton, and I get people shouting at me when I say it about Hamilton as well. And Alonso has done this as well. You can tell when a driver has basically made up their mind that they will be, quote unquote, as Hamilton likes to say, pushed off track. He pushed me off track. When the throttle is applied almost instantly as they come around the corner, because now they've got the wider line, they don't need to brake as hard, so they can apply throttle and kind of swing it around the outside.
Use the greater momentum.
Use the extra track. And that is the thing is, right, even if you're pushed off track, you have then used the advantage of having a wider line to gain an advantage off the track and pass off track. It's a slam dunk. It's like, okay, maybe he pushed you off, but then you got an advantage by overtaking off track. So tough shit. You can't do it. And the other thing is, my mind on it is, if you're alongside at the apex, right, then you should have the room and all that. But that person made the line. They made the corner.
I agree with you on this thing. Yeah, because imagine if there's nothing... If the entire place outside of the track is filled with gravel, where are you going to go in that case?
You're going to break and back out.
Right? Precisely. And that's why I want the gravels back. I mean,
the way I think it should work is if you take a risk and you sling it around the outside there, you need to make sure you're within the line. Like if that person manages to fucking stay within the lines and not hit you, then they've made the corner. So what are you talking about? If you're ahead and you've got the line then, but he's not ahead. When you're alongside, it's
all this nonsense would not even be there if the tracks were actually more punishing. That's the biggest problem with Formula 1 right now. They've tried to sanitize almost everything, and that leads to these issues. Just imagine if
there was gravel there.
If there was gravel, or just
Max would have been out of the race,
or he would have not gone for it, right? He would have already braked earlier.
If there was gravel there, Max would not have swung it around the outside. Simple as. Because there would have been no room. Because the thing is, some people pointed out, you can see where they're coming into the corner. But it's really obvious, and all the drivers know, 3 cars are not getting through that corner easily.
Yeah.
Especially, they're just not. 3 wide doesn't work at that corner. So
that's just, again, there's something I think Formula 1 needs to look at this, because you cannot go ahead and have tracks where this 50-50 moves are actually available. These kind of things create controversies.
They need to do one of two things. But they need to do one of two things, because in Austria as well, Max went off track and kept the position, and they crashed the next lap, so there was no time to look at the decision. But Norris made that corner, and then Max used the runoff to come back on track quicker. So it was the same kind of situation.
Similar.
Yeah,
that was a slam dunk for me. That was
the thing for me is, right, the simple fact for me. This is the reason why I think that GP said that on the first lap, because I remember that basically Red Bull didn't fight it, and they basically said just give the position back, right? So everyone on Twitter who basically is like, no, Max shouldn't have got 10 second there, he deserved the penalty. I'm like, well, Red Bull disagrees with you because Red Bull didn't fight it. Like, if Red Bull fought that, then you would say, right, okay, maybe there's an argument here. But Red Bull,
there's a bigger nonsense going on, by the way, which is that apparently Max is cornered in Red Bull now, and no one listens to him, and Red Bull didn't fight for him hard enough, which is basically the same nonsense we just heard, I think, few months back for Lewis and Toto. It's the same bullshit that is actually, I think every fan base has the same morality. If anyone is offended, just
is Mercedes sabotaging George Russell right now? Then, this is my point. Like, you said it earlier. There's always this hypocrisy that, like, and I'll argue with it all the time on Twitter, where someone will say something about one driver. I'll say that's bullshit. I'll get called a fanboy of that driver. And then months later, the same thing will happen to their driver, and they'll be arguing that their driver's the best now, even though they're in the same situation. And you're like, what are you talking? Like, a few months ago, you said that when this happened to Max, or George.
That's the whole thing. And it's just, again, the problem is, with this entire thing of, again, Mercedes is an option. I look, if Max wants to go to Mercedes, if that is his final plan,
it could be a good decision for 2026, but it's yet to be seen.
Look, you cannot. Somewhere down the line, you have to be very careful about a few things. The first of them is Red Bull is a team. Sure, Adrian Newey was basically the god of aerodynamics. But the team was not solely Adrian Newey. There are a lot of great elements that are still part of it. They might have hit a stumbling block, but every fucking team hits a stumbling block. That's the whole thing, and
someone
don't want to understand.
We'll get on to like stuff later, but someone said about like Alonso should have signed for Mercedes when he had the option earlier in the season. But this, for me, just brings up this constant thing of what I'll say about Max. What I'll say about Max right now is the same as what I said about Alonso back then. Is okay. If Alonso had the ability to see the future and where Mercedes was right now, then fair enough, you could say maybe it's a good decision, right?
But the problem is he was given a 1-year contract. But
also we don't know where Mercedes will be in 2025 or where Aston will be in 2025. We don't know where Mercedes and Aston will be in 2026. And I think it's the same for Red Bull right now, which is people are saying, well, Mercedes might be better in 2026. And the argument you have is, well, Red Bull is beating Mercedes comfortably right now. They're probably going to beat Mercedes comfortably in 2025 unless things change massively, right? Which they could. And this is the thing.
It could happen,
But my point is, what's the old saying? It's like one in the hand is better than two in the bush. And it's like, why would Max throw away the likelihood of a title fight in 2025 to go to a team that potentially could win in 2026? So it's just not how you do it,
I think it's just, for me, the entire weekend was basically a cultural shock for Max, where he found it hard to a certain extent to actually accept the fact that it's not going to be days where he'd just scamper off into the distance. He's worried about two things, right? He was worried about two things.
Do you think maybe this is acceptance this weekend now, where after that frustration, he'll kind of accept the new situation and we'll see a different Max?
Look, if he is smart enough, he needs to have that. And he needs to stay away from Yas. Because, I mean, again, it's unfair for me to actually say this because he's his father, but I mean, he's not a good influence. I'm so sorry to say, but he's not a good influence. He will continue to talk about Mercedes.
Yeah, look, his dad should. If his dad is acting kind of as a management position, then if there was a situation where it's like, okay, Dad, look, I'm not going to pay any attention to you. Throw a tantrum and see what deals you can get us. Then that if that is what is going on, it's all genius. But it doesn't appear that way. You know what I mean? Like, if that was the situation and it ends up in a situation where Red Bull offer Max a shit ton of money to stay next year and Mercedes, and Max has this choice of like $150 million from two teams, then you're like, if that was the thing in the back of, but for a fact, given who Yas is, that is not what he's thinking.
Yeah, he's not. He's not.
Because
And
he was making
that's
this.
what I worry
he
about.
was doing this while they were dominating. That's what tells
Yeah.
me it's like,
Exactly.
I'm not
He's-
sure.
Yeah, and I think Spa is going to reveal a lot of things. Again, if somehow Red Bull is not either the fastest or close to that in Spa, I think all bets are off. I hope Max gains a level of understanding and he realizes that there is maybe a potential threat from Lando.
I hope McLaren get a 1-2 and Max DNFs.
Oh God, again.
No, just not
Summer
for the
break would be fun
championship.
in that case.
Just because for me it'll be fucking hilarious, and
4
how
weeks of fun, by the
entertaining
way.
will the rest of the season be?
Yeah.
You know?
4
This
weeks
is
of
what's
fun.
great. Like as a non-Max Verstappen fan, who again, like, and this is not to insult Max because I've said he's like he's basically the closest thing to Schumacher we've seen in years, and I'll piss Lewis Hamilton fans off by saying that.
Yeah.
But I want to see Max on edge in the ropes fighting, because Max when he's under pressure and not throwing tantrums is spectacular. And as I say that, my daughter is throwing a tantrum downstairs.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear that in the
Sounding a
background.
bit like Maths, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll call GP.
Yeah. It's
It's fine. Yeah.
Anyways, again, moving on from this, I think
we do need to just talk about the incident between Max and Hamilton right before we finish on Red Bull.
Oh God. Yeah, what's your take on it first? I'll go after
This is the thing. Both are somewhat at fault, but Max definitely more so. The reason I'd say that is because Lewis could have easily avoided that situation, first of all, because there was tons of space. I kind of squint saying that because he shouldn't have to avoid it, if that makes sense. You know, like whenever someone says he could have avoided that about any driver, I kind of wince because I'm like, that's not up to that driver to avoid that. It's up, you know what I mean? However, the other reason I'd say Lewis is somewhat at fault because he did move in the braking zone, and that's not on either. And I've had a pretty strict line about this because when Max moved in the braking zone, I kind of hardline. So unlike the FIA, I'm going to be consistent and say that both of them shouldn't be moving in the brake zone.
Yeah.
However, I think Max is predominantly at fault because there is a simple thing that the drivers have all agreed on, which is you should be given room at the apex and all of these things as long as you are there arriving at the apex under control. And Max clearly wasn't in control of that car going into that corner. So that for me is the biggest kind of, he might have been alongside, but he wasn't there under control. So that's kind of why it's Max's fault for me.
So the fun thing that happened with me was I first saw it's all right. Just added background noise.
Yeah.
So what happened was the first view that I saw was a front on view, and from the front on view, which is very honestly, when Heinz Frentzen actually put it up, the resemblance is uncanny. You see Max basically lunging down the inside. It was similar to how Villeneuve did to Schumacher. And just
you see
again, you
Hamilton
could see that,
turning in.
Yeah, and you could see that Lewis, he had his eyes on. I mean, you could see it again. What Lewis said on team radio just after the incident, I didn't move my steering even one bit, which is basically a flat out lie. It is obvious, and one could see there he was moving his car.
He's turning into a corner. Of course, he's going to be moving his steering wheel. So it kind of
but the thing is,
it's a ridiculous statement.
Yeah, but the thing is, when there's almost 3/4 of a car right in front of you, you're not moving into it, right? So maybe there was a lack of judgment on Lewis. I don't think he did it intentionally. I do think FIA needs to investigate that fucking front suspension of Lewis's because that never breaks. I'm surprised it never fucking breaks.
It's made of titanium, yeah.
It's made of vibranium, man. It's just it does not fucking break. And
you've looked at this closer than me then, because one thing that has just cropped into my mind is I did say Lewis moved in the brake zone. Yeah. Did Lewis move very much in the brake zone? Because that could, if he moved,
that's the
it
whole
looked
thing.
to me like it wasn't an aggressive move in the brake zone. It was kind of just a late move.
Yeah.
However, there is something to be said, and I've said this in the past for other drivers, where if a driver moves in the brake zone, that could cause another driver to lock up because
precisely. And I think the biggest problem, and by the way, what you're saying right now is exactly what Max said. He said that when I made the move, Lewis started moving towards me in the braking zone. That's why I locked up, because I pressed the brakes even harder to accommodate for it. Now that's again Max's view. But look, there are two views of it. The first is the front on, the second is the aerial view. From the front on, you can see Lewis maybe moving towards Max and basically causing the collision would not have been caused. Again, there was no harm, no foul, because both of them continued, which is again a massive surprise. But even then, it was from that view, it seems that Lewis turned in. From the aerial view, by the way, if you look at it, from the aerial view, it seems that Lewis has already committed by the time that Max actually makes the lunge. Make of it what you want. Ultimately,
that for me
comes
is,
down to be
I think maybe I looked more so at the aerial view, because for me it looks like Lewis did move late and he was kind of moved in the brake zone. But the reason I kind of forgave that a little bit was it didn't look to me like he weaved at any point before that. It looks like it was one committed move in the but just maybe a bit too late, if that makes sense. But for me that was predominantly Max's fault. But predominantly, I'm not sure. I would need to go and review it from all the different angles.
Yeah.
Let's say I have to say I think Lewis was somewhat at fault, but Max was more so at fault, because he was clearly. I think he lunged too late and it was a bit out of control. And I think
look, the very first view that I had on real time, I thought it was Max at fault and he should have been penalized. The more views I see, it becomes even more grey for me. And ideally, if it came for me, it was I would not have penalized either of the two.
There was no further investigation then by the.
They did the investigation after the race. Both of them were investigated, because as soon as this evidence came out that again Lewis was moving, both were summoned, and then it was a racing incident and they moved on.
So again, basically, that means the FIA stewards came to the decision that it was 50-50, which essentially. So that is probably why both of us are like,
exactly.
Okay.
And that's where it all comes down to for me, because look, you can't sit down and do the whole every incident should not be that one of them has to be penalized. That's where I tend to stand on these things. There's this whole thing called let them race. So let them race, for fuck's sake.
However, one thing the FIA does need to fucking do, and I'm sick of having it, is just, if that was a situation, let's say that was a situation where Max locked up there, right? And let's say Lewis didn't move in the brake zone, right? And Max just came in hot, locked up, and Lewis did bail out, right? And this is why it annoys me when people say, oh, well, he could have moved, like with Norris in Austria. It's like, he could have moved the other way. The driver shouldn't have to do that. And then what annoys me in that situation is, if there's no contact, normally the FIA don't fucking even bother to investigate or look at it, because the FIA say consequences aren't taken into account, but we only ever see them do anything when there's a consequence. You know what I mean? Like it's like,
look, if ideally if there was a scenario where Max basically lunged down the inside, did a block pass and completed the maneuver.
Is that what it's called now? Block pass, not dive bomb, isn't it?
Yeah, but
so sorry, someone on Twitter was complaining that they're like, when a British driver does it, it's a block pass. When a Dutch driver does it, it's a dive bomb.
I know which one you're talking about.
Which is BS as well.
Anyway, I agree. But the thing is, if Max had basically completed the move, I'm entirely fine with it. That's why I have zero issues with the kind of dive bombs or block pass that Lando tried.
If he hadn't have locked up and hit Hamilton,
even if he locked up, he stays on the track and basically completes the move, and that's spectacular.
The thing is, though, if he locked up but still had control, he lost control basically of the car at that moment. That for me is kind of that for me is the problem, because there's been a pretty big agreement kind of since 2021 in Abu Dhabi. They've been pretty good about this. Not always, but most of the time, it's kind of, as long as you are controlled. But as long as you're controlled and stay inside the track, you're generally kind of like, that's fine, you know?
And
anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Again, just to wrap up the whole Red Bull thing.
Jesus, we're an hour and a half in, yeah. I haven't even noticed.
What the fuck is going on with Red Bull, by the way? in terms of the upgrades and everything not working. Now, I have a theory, but I'll let you first take over. Where do you think everything's going wrong? Is it because Adrian Newey has left?
No, I don't think it's going wrong at all. I just think it's what Adrian Newey said at the start of the season, which is we're very quickly approaching the limits of these regulations in terms of performance, which means that there is a ceiling. And obviously that ceiling, like, they'll keep moving by smaller and smaller amounts towards that ceiling. But I think the problem is that Red Bull and McLaren took what looked visually like similar approaches, but I think they've taken two, not very different approaches, but clearly have gone, in the final line, have gone slightly different. And I think clearly the performance window for McLaren's approach is wider and the performance window for Red Bull's approach is smaller. And all that's happening is, because that performance window for Red Bull is smaller, it's putting them in a position where, like this weekend, to get the performance, you had to add a bit more understeer, and Max fucking hates that. So I think this is just the situation now where McLaren have a wider performance window than anyone else at the minute. So they are going to be better at different tracks. And it's not that the upgrades have gone wrong. It's just, to be faster, you're getting a smaller and smaller and smaller window. You know what I mean? So, like Red Bull last year could afford to take 3/10 out of that window because they had like a second lead. Yeah. Whereas McLaren right now, like, you know, they've probably got a wider window where, sure, they can be faster and more comfortable at the same time. Whereas Red Bull is just going more and more. Like, I don't think Red Bull is more
aerodynamic, or do you think it's more mechanical? Because why I ask this question is, let me explain why I'm stressing on this is, if Red Bull is able to take the curbs as well as a McLaren or a Ferrari is the best at that. If Red Bull can do that, Red Bull would have secured pole position by at least a 10th this time. Yeah. He lost a 10th there. It's basically, and that's where I think the entire aerodynamically, I don't think the car has any weaknesses. The major weakness that Red Bull is actually suffering from is it cannot ride the curbs, and that is something that hurts the car. Again, when there are major curbs, we can see the whole thing because the racing line changes, and it was a drastic change. The McLaren from Norris was basically clattering over the curbs. Max was going
around it completely.
You're losing.
The problem with that statement, though, is it's kind of a mixture of both. I get what you're saying. Like, mechanically, I think the suspension setup of the McLaren now has a wider window to work in.
Basically, whereas all the rivals, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's cause even Ferrari is brilliant at
this. This is where Red Bull, I think, is going to have an issue, because this is why 2025 could be very different, right? The problem now is Red Bull probably need to change the suspension before they can change the aero approach, because both need to work hand in hand, because we're not in a situation like 22 and 23 where there's a huge like performance gap to play with, where they could basically loosen the suspension completely and then, you know, chuck different aero. You're within a 10th. So like every change is so minor now. I think the problem is they are probably in a situation where they have to change the suspension to something closer to McLaren, and they can't do that because it's cost cap. They can't do that until the winter break, because if they change the suspension, I would imagine that they'll have to change the suspension mountings, which means changing the chassis, which just can't happen under cost cap these days. Like we saw with Mercedes last year, they were locked into a situation where they kind of knew where they had to go, but they had to wait for the chassis change.
Yeah, but Red Bull has changed the suspension system from last season as well, no? From
but that's my point. They have to do it over the winter break. So
don't you think is there a possibility that they've already been working on it?
Sure, but my point is they're probably in a situation where the points where they mount the suspension to actually change the suspension, those points have to be changed. And to change those, you need to go through it's basically a new chassis that has to go through the new crash testing and all of that stuff. So it's basically all the teams have said this. It's basically impossible to change the chassis mid-season now. You can't do it anymore. So the reason I now suspect that is because of the approach they're having with aero at this weekend. So, you know, the haunches on the back of the car, they changed that for Max. but that's not happening at every weekend. So they've now got
only
two.
for high downforce.
Yeah. So the reason I think is they probably are trying to get less load on the suspension at certain, less or more load depending on what they're doing. So I just think they're in a situation where they've kind of put themselves in a corner now. So they have to change the suspension. And I think that's where they're kind of they're stuck in aero because they now have
It's
to
a lot,
appease
right?
Yeah,
because this could actually hurt them in the long run. Because if they
it might
make a
be
change,
fine for 2025, but they're going to have to make a change for 2025. But then you're in the same position as Mercedes, where you make a change to
could or
suspension.
could not work.
Yes, and then whereas McLaren now have a suspension and aero setup that works. Yeah. If Red Bull have to change their mechanical platform, they're essentially in the same position as Mercedes, where you're pretty sure it's going to work.
They're actually in a worse situation because they're already slower and they are moving from basically a working concept to a concept which might or might not work.
Yes.
Which is,
yeah.
Again, and
Red Bull understand these regulations as like much better, I think, than Mercedes or Ferrari. But you could. But in these, as Dan Fallows said, he's like, the problem with these regulations is they're so complex.
He does not understand it. That's the problem with these regulations.
But like Dan Fallows basically said, the problem with these regulations that he saw this in Red Bull. He's like, they're so complex that you understand it in the wind tunnel, but then your understanding changes on the track. So it's like it's really difficult.
And you know what this means actually? This actually means is that Red Bull is actually. Again, I've had a chat with Dr. Obbs.
He's amazing. Yeah, he's really, really good.
We might be able to get him on during the summer break.
So we can sit here like this, not understanding him for 2 hours.
Precisely. I'll have my notebook here. I'll basically hang my, I think it's
I'm just going to let AI listen to him and then like explain this to me like a toddler.
Yeah. By the way, I'm actually a mechanical engineer, so I know a few things.
I'm a software engineer, so I'm not a real engineer.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to say that a lot to my friends. Anyhow, the point is that what the situation Red Bull finds itself in is, it's very precarious. It could actually screw everything up for 2025, and if that happens, oh boy, good luck keeping Max Verstappen.
This is the last word on this is a big thing with these regulations that make it really interesting though, because. What happens in the wind tunnel in CFD is not guaranteed to be exactly what happens on the track, because as soon as you pass a certain level of load, all of a sudden you get that instability, and then you have to take it out with a performance window and everything. So like
the biggest problem with
the thing is this could happen to McLaren in 2 races though. McLaren could bring an upgrade in 2 races. I think it's unlikely. I think McLaren are going in the right direction, but if it's happening to Red Bull...
We don't know.
We don't know. That's my point.
The problem
if this is happening to Red Bull in 2 races' time, McLaren could bring an upgrade. Red Bull could bring something after the summer break, that puts them a tenth ahead of McLaren. McLaren then bring an upgrade that they think will put them back, but knocks them down. So it's so difficult to understand. I
think this was something that James Allison talked about. He said that the biggest problem with these regulations is purposing does not show up in a wind tunnel. And if that is the case, it becomes the entire thing it turns into a guesswork. Anyway, a lot of talk about all these things. Now let's talk about something that infuriated me during the fucking race. You watched the Sky F1 feed or the F1 TV?
Sky F1 feed.
Trick question. I mean, not a trick question. You'll be probably aware of it. In the first 25 laps, how many times did David Croft mention Max Verstappen sounding like someone who had a late night?
I will point out, I wasn't counting this, but I did see a tweet, and I think it was 9. Yeah. Okay.
In the first 25 laps, and he went on and on and on. I had a tweet, I think midway through the race, where I said that if I had a shot every time David Croft talked about Max having a long night or something, I probably would have dozed off, I think, a half an hour earlier. Because, I mean, okay, let's get one thing straight. And this was something that I ranted on Twitter. Again, I gained a lot of followers because of it, apparently. Should F1 reconsider the fact that Sky is a global feed? Does it need that anymore?
This is why I will say one. Go ahead, I was just going to say, I will say one weird thing. It is funny how we notice things depending on how we feel about something. Because I noticed a lot of people pointing out the British bias and that kind of thing when Crofty...
No, screw the British
I'm not
bias.
saying it's British bias, but my
Yeah.
point is, a lot of people were pointing out that Crofty did that. I have to say, I didn't even notice because I think my opinion is, I really like Crofty, and when Crofty says stuff like that, it just goes over my head. I'm like, Crofty with his weird things. Like, I didn't notice it was 9 times until I went on Twitter and saw people ranting about it. So I personally didn't notice. I'm the same with Brundle as well. I constantly see people complaining about Brundle, and I'm like, Brundle said what? So I think it's like, there is the bias the other way where I really like Crofty and Brundle, so I don't notice things they say. And I know I'm a bit biased because sometimes Ted Kravitz will then jump on and be like, "Oh, did you see that with Max?" And I'm like, "Oh, there goes Ted Kravitz again, licking his balls because he's so excited that something bad has happened to Max." So, and then people say to me, "It's like he wasn't like that," and I do have to catch myself kind of thinking, "Do I hate Ted Kravitz?" You know, So like, I get it though. I get why it's annoying to certain fans.
No, for me, the problem was that it became unprofessional after a certain point. It wasn't, because the thing is, it was the first 25 minutes, 25 laps. It was okay. He said it once, twice, thrice, 4 times. The thing is, as Max Verstappen's anger increased during the race, Crofty's intensity of consistently talking about, and you could see even Brundle was annoyed with this because after a few times he stopped acknowledging this thing.
Okay.
Ted Kravitz was also saying, look, Crofty, even not everyone needs a 9-hour sleep. And even he said that.
I do remember Kravitz saying that. Yeah. If Ted Kravitz is backing up Max Verstappen, we've got a problem.
Yeah. You screwed up big time.
Yeah.
And look, whether Crofty likes Max or does not like Max, it's an entirely different thing. The whole thing came about basically them trying to pile on a driver, and it became very unprofessional. And you see it all the time. The dumbest thing was, at the start of the race, he said, Lando had a brilliant start. And I'm watching this, and what I see and what he's telling me, I don't think those two things relate. Because Oscar had a better start. And everything showed that. Even after even they showed the
Lando
reaction
really needs
time.
to work on the second phase as well.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, that's also the thing.
Yeah.
But it's just like, look, you have... And I love Lando. There's nothing wrong with it.
That crybaby Lando who's always insulting Lewis, you like him? What's wrong with you?
That's why I like him. So,
okay.
And you know, this random, just unnecessarily gassing up British drivers is something I've never liked. And at that very moment when he said Lando had a brilliant start, this was his first line, and I'm looking at, no, he did not. Oscar is right next to him. You know, he did not have a brilliant start.
One of the things, again, maybe this is just because I've, like we talked about this confirmation bias. Like I think I talked about. Maybe this is confirmation bias, but I do. It does annoy me the way that they back Lewis over literally everybody. Sometimes it really does irritate me because this is one of the things I always have to say, which is like, love Lewis. He's an incredible racer. I can't stand a lot of his fans, and sometimes I include Sky Sports F1 in that because one of the things that they said that bugged me, and I think it was actually Brundle that said it, was they talked about the last 2 wins for Mercedes, right? And they said something along the lines of, with a bit of help, obviously George much more than the other, and that kind of bugged me because I was like, no, hang on a second. In both situations with Mercedes, in both of those situations, it was down to the fact that George and Hamilton, McLaren fucked up, and George and Hamilton in both situations did everything they needed to do to be in a position where if that happened, they were there to win. So it's like, it bugs me that they're like, wait, hang on, why does Lewis get more credit than George there? Like, just because it was Silverstone or because it's Lewis? Like, both of them are British. Like, what is the situation? So it's not British bias. It's just these odd things that they have.
These favorites, right? Apparently Lando is the next guy for them, and you can see it in the way they commentate and the way they talk.
Maybe that's
about
why a
these
lot of
drivers.
people on Twitter don't like Lando, because a lot of people follow the Sky Sports feed. So maybe that is the situation.
And it became, again, for me the biggest worry is, look, after a point it becomes very, very irritating. if I'm trying to watch, and again, this was not a race where Max was the centerpiece. It was the race lead that needed to be focused on. But the amount of time Crofty just went on and on and on, and like, for fuck's sakes. Again, I think even Tomo talked about it. Where he said that Crofty probably does not like sim racing. I mean, no, it's not. He probably does not like Max Verstappen as it appears right now. Because
No, I disagree with that. I think Crofty loves Max Verstappen a lot. Like, he's always talking about him.
Yeah, but I've not seen this level of nonsense.
Brundle is an absolute Max Verstappen fanboy. Like,
Brundle is, yeah. Look,
yeah.
I think, as I said, I think we talked about it a few weeks back as well. That Brundle is actually the most senior statesman, so he's a bit away from all this nonsense.
The thing, I think I like Brundle over everyone else because I feel like it's because Brundle is a racing driver. First of all, I think like Brundle is a former F1 driver who when he talks about an F1 driver, you can see it. He's talking about it from the point of view of what are they like on track.
Yeah.
So when he's talking about Lewis or Max, you can see it's equal kind of, these guys are both incredible racing drivers. You know, like these are two of the best drivers on the field. And he gives Lewis credit now to say Lewis is still one of the best racing drivers on the field.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Like, but he'll talk about Max equally. He'll say it about Lando now as well. Whereas I think sometimes what happens is, I think with Crofty and these guys and Kravitz, these guys are not racing drivers. So sometimes the fanboyism does bubble up, you know.
And you know, for me, the biggest worry is are they playing to a crowd? And if the thing is, if they are playing to a British crowd, then look, be a British crowd.
I get what you mean. They shouldn't be I've had this argument a few times.
Yeah, and I think for me the biggest question was this weekend. For me, the biggest proof was, I think I have around 3,000 to 4,000 likes on the entire rant I did. It was a very long rant, and
I haven't read it, and I don't plan to.
I don't think all those 4,000 guys even read that, so it's understandable. But you cannot do that. At some point in time, it starts becoming irritating because you're targeting a driver. You cannot. That's not a neutral commentary. That's a commentary where you're trying to basically make headlines out of something that doesn't need to be. And even Kravitz did that afterwards, where he said that Red Bull is saying that it was a racing incident, and they normally say that when Max is at fault. What nonsense is this? Just be that. In that case, don't be a global feed.
That's for me, there has to be a line where, like, if some YouTuber or us, for example...
If Viaplay does this, if Sky Germany does this, Sky Italia, what else? Ziggo Sports, what else is this? Eurosport or whatever. Any of them do that, they are catering to a very small region. If India has a local thing and they do something like this to gas up their particular thing, I understand that, but this is
the problem, isn't it? Because the thing is, you could say that those guys, some of those guys, those different international broadcasters, technically do like, I think Viaplay is the Dutch broadcaster if you switch the language. I think on F1 TV, for example, I can't remember which one it is, but on some of those languages, that is the case. So like, you could have the same argument for others, but I think the problem is, with the English feed, that is going to so many countries. Like, you know, like the Dutch feed is going to, Dutch people, and there's probably a couple of islands like San Martin and stuff, right? Whereas
but again, that's
the Sky Sports feed is going to just a huge audience, like a massive audience, and a variety of countries. Like it's not just England and Ireland, it's India as well. It's every expat from those countries. United States,
biggest
Canada,
market that they want to get into.
Know? Yeah. So
my point is, there has to be a level of accountability with the level of broadcasting that you're doing. And yesterday was poor. And we have all basically accepted the fact that it is going to be partisan. We've all accepted that.
I feel the same way as you. I feel the same way as you, that like when it has to change. Like if you're a YouTube podcast like us, right, you can be as biased as you want because you're a YouTube podcast. And we
are less biased. By the way, we are less biased.
No, we're not. Subscribe.
Even though the podcast name is biased, we are still less biased.
You probably noticed I haven't had this argument this year as much. Last year and the year before, I went on and on about this. And to be honest, I've kind of just given up. And do you know the reason why? Because if we're not going to get professional journalism in politics and news and warfare, I don't think we're going to fucking get it in F1. And I think I've just waved the white flag where I'm just like, this is just
Yeah.
the world now. Like,
Yeah,
I just
probably.
kind of, I can either stop listening to them and go to F1 TV live, or I can just give up.
Which is
and
honestly
accept
good.
it.
But look, why I tend to listen to Sky F1 on and off. The reason is because they have better insights when they are not being this biased. And it's so hilarious because just before the race, someone actually had tweeted,
Well,
"Does it make sense
yeah.
for me to get an F1 TV subscription and a VPN?" And my only reply was, "Only if there is no British driver fighting for the win." And
You know, like the thing is, though, I think they're just. This is just the way the world's going to be now, and the Max and Lando crash in Austria. People's reactions to that absolutely showed me one thing, which was people just listen to whoever suits their opinion, so it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter anymore. Because there were people who would listen to one racing driver's opinion over the other, right? So people were like,
Apparently, Peter Windsor is the favorite pundit
Because
right
he's-
now for Max Verstappen fans.
yes,
I mean,
because he's agreeing with Max a few times. This is my
Yeah.
point. So, like, people were saying Jolyon Palmer's wrong and Alex Brundle's right if you were a Max fan. And Norris fans were saying Jolyon Palmer's correct and Alex Brundle's right. Because both of them were basically saying they lean one way or the other, right? The funniest part, though, was if you listen to what they were saying, they were going through it, giving their opinions as racing drivers. And then when the two of them were together, they both ended up agreeing with each other and going, yeah, Max was more at fault.
yeah.
And it was like, and then all of a sudden, everyone's quiet because they're like, oh, we have no one to listen to anymore. So I just think the world's gone this way. I've just given up caring about it because I've realized
Yeah.
that if the news isn't going to, like, if people talking about war politics aren't going to be, if there's no like voice that's unbiased there, we've just got no hope in Formula One. So I've just given
I
up
do
on
think,
it. Like,
but yeah, I mean, that's where I think maybe if
there's
one
no
broadcast
unbiased
needs to be
media
better.
anymore.
I
It's
do
gone.
think because you know why I actually say this thing, because again all these YouTubers and everything is popping right now, and the kind of data and detail these guys go through, none of the TV pundits do, and I get enraged by
I've
this.
genuinely started to think that I might set up some sort of YouTube based channel, but like get different news pundits and make
Yeah.
call it unbiased news or something, where all we do is just read out exactly what happened, and then it's like, no, we're not taking any bias. It's like, you know, Russia or Ukraine bombed Moscow. And they're like, oh well, they were justified. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're just
Yeah.
telling you this is what
Opinion
happened.
needs to go.
Yeah, this is
Opinion
what
needs to
happened, and you can take whatever inference, you can decide whatever you feel about that, but
Yeah.
this is what happened, you know? Like,
I mean,
Hitler
this
killing 6 million Jewish people probably was a good idea from the viewpoint of certain people in Germany.
Fucking
That-
finally, we
My
Hitler
point,
listing.
but my point is, that doesn't mean you're correct. It's just, these are the facts. Like, Hitler killing 6 million Jews, two different people will have very different opinions about that. And
Oh,
I know
yeah.
which one, I know which way I stand. It was fucking wrong. But my point is that if you had a factual news station, all it would say is Adolf Hitler has killed 6 million Jews.
Yeah, and
that would be
this
that.
Is
There would
basically
be
it
no.
right now.
Whereas what's happening now is everything is Trump, you know, Trump got shot by a very bad person, and the other, Trump was almost killed and unfortunately survived
No,
by another.
No. Trump fell.
Yeah.
Trump fell. No,
Yes. Yeah.
no shot or nothing.
And then
Trump fell.
Forbes saying this will
It was
help
Forbes,
Trump's
right?
with. No,
Yeah,
that
I
was
think, yeah.
CNN. And then Trump said, Forbes said, Trump is appeasing black voters or something along those lines by getting
I think
shot.
it's utter nonsense. Honestly, look,
So this is my point. You can't expect the F1 to be better than the news.
but but F1 TV is better in that respect, at least for now. That is somewhere they were, and apparently, as I got to know, F1 TV was actually developed by Liberty for this very reason, because these complaints had been piling up since 2018. 2018 was the first time
makes
it
sense.
began.
You're taking the
In
country bias out of it, aren't you? 'Cause
Yeah, that's what-
you're
and
here
I think-
for F1. So
Yeah, and maybe I think it's about time that maybe F1 or Liberty takes the next step. Either have a chat, or whatever, sit down with Sky that, look, you have your own editorial guidelines. We understand that, but this is a global feed. If you cannot treat it as such,
can
if
I
you
be
cannot
honest?
treat it as
I think
such,
it's.
you need to just
Can I be honest?
Really have it
I
there.
think by adding the F1 live feed, they've kind of, for me, I think that's the other reason why I've stopped having this argument, because I'm kind of like, they've given me the option and I've decided I don't want it, which So it's like basically, I know that the British feed will say some overly British things, and as an Irish person, I know I will get pissed off about them. But I don't really want to change because I enjoy listening to Crofty and Brundle, so I'm kind of just making that trade-off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, maybe it just doesn't... Maybe this is why Fox and MSNBC and CNN... It used to be that CNN was very down the middle and gave you the approach, and the other two were on. And now CNN has kind of gone more to the left. To the left. Right? So, like, maybe it's just a case of no one really gives a shit and it's only us complaining about it, and most fans just...
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, we're just... Maybe we are in the minority, but we are always... Look,
you're
fans
Indian,
are always...
So you're always in the minority. So...
I'll always
I'm joking.
be in the majority.
And that doesn't make sense because there's more of you than... Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Maybe we're in Mexico right now.
But I had to check out the bingo thing for Indians. Remind me to actually make this bingo card. And I think, given this is the second last podcast before the summer break, I'm kind of okay with this one being way longer than normal. So,
I mean, extend. But look, this race deserves it. I had it in mind, but again, this race deserves it.
There's a lot.
Again, enough of all this. We're done with that. Just finally, your favorite driver, who should replace him?
My favorite driver,
Sergio Perez.
But Vettel was replaced. Perez. Okay. Sorry, I thought you were...
It has to be. You're in Mexico still.
The only. I was trying to think. I was like, I know you meant Perez straight away, but I was like, I'm trying to think. I was like, was I ever a fanboy? And I was like, yes, Vettel. I was a massive Vettel fanboy.
Yeah.
I did a video about this the other day, and I think Ricciardo should replace him from the point of view of the team right now. That's not who... The way I phrased
does it solve the problem?
Yes.
Leave the practicality out of it. If you're Red Bull, you're ready to go. I can
in like 4 minutes. I can explain all of this really quickly. In like 4 minutes of a rant. From a strictly point of view of being a fan and who I would want in there, it should be Sainz or it should be Sainz. Realistically, I think best person, or Alonso, or Norris, or Piastri, if you want to absolutely throw things. So there are a lot of great choices, right? From a purely performance point of view, if you're Red Bull and you're not looking at anything other than performance, Yuki Tsunoda absolutely deserves a shot there, right? And it's up to him whether he sinks or...
She does not agree.
No, she's not a Yuki fan. But yeah... Very racist, my daughter. Very racist. She's 3 years old. She's 3 years old. She's not. I'm joking. But yeah, anyway. Yuki Tsunoda absolutely deserves a drive there. I think he's done enough to at least get sick. Jesus, she really doesn't like Yuki. Deserves a shot to get at least 6 months there. Wow.
Okay, what about Daniel?
Here's the point. If you're talking from a Red Bull standpoint... And purely from a Red Bull standpoint, Ricciardo just is the only one that really makes sense. And here's why. They clearly don't have faith in Yuki to go up to the top team. If they did, they could have made this change a long time ago. Like at least last year, they could have made this change. Or the year before. They've decided against it. Yuki's clearly never getting the jump up. So I think that's just that. Lawson, they're not going to put in there because the last time they put a rookie in there right off the bat, it didn't go well. Both times, basically, that they put a young driver up. So I don't think Lawson's going there. I think they want an experienced hand who gets along with Max Verstappen and who also has some sort of marketable favoritism. And Horner needs that marketing favor right now as well because he's also got the Austrian side on his back. So if he loses a shit ton of money, that's going to be a problem. So that's why I think as well there's a good chance Perez goes at the midpoint because... he also has that worry now that it's not only performance. If he loses the championship and crashes the car a lot, that's a financial issue for the team. So I just think Ricciardo is the only one that makes sense. And what it does as well is, even though I don't think Ricciardo deserves it, if I'm honest, like there's other drivers who deserve it, I will just say that. Ricciardo makes sense because you can move him in there. It's no more risky than keeping Perez the way Perez has been going, realistically. Sorry, Perez, but it's no more risky. And it also frees up a seat to get Lawson in and actually do that kind of 6 months of let's test whether Lawson would be good enough. So basically, either Ricciardo all of a sudden comes back to old Ricciardo and they get an amazing 6 months with Ricciardo and he can continue, or Lawson does really well and they say, right, Ricciardo, we tried it, it hasn't worked. Sorry, but that seat's gone to Lawson now for 2025.
Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense if you do this, because it gives basically both Daniel and Lawson a chance to. Okay, first of all, with Yuki, a lot of people are upset and everything that he's not getting the opportunity. There's a reason behind it. Apparently, Helmut Marko tends to do this. They have this simulator test that they do, and Yuki tends to be on a very lower level compared to almost everyone. That has been the case since Gasly left, so 2022, something like that, and that has continued. Why Yuki has stayed with the team, Honda. That's the only reason why he's still there. So where he will be, yeah. So where he will be after 2025 is again, it's a big question. Even this weekend, by the way, Daniel was quicker. This weekend, Daniel was quicker. He
I think
suffered
3 out of
because
the 4 last weekends, right?
yeah. And I think someone put it out on Twitter that since that chassis change, I think after China or something like that, it's basically level in qualifying and level in races, where both of them have basically done the similar thing. So again, it's not a clear-cut thing where Yuki is better or Daniel is better.
Yeah,
They are not going with Yuki. That's a very clear thing.
No, they've made their choice on that.
Yeah. Ideally, by the way, if I was in Red Bull, I am not sure that Max is going to stay with me for the long term. I am not sure because Jos is not going to relent. That's something that's a very... It could not be more clear.
I think they know they have him for 2025, but I don't know. 2026 is not a done deal by any means.
Yeah. And ideally, Red Bull, they need to start looking at finding the next big driver, put him in...
This is what I said in my video was they realistically, if they were being absolutely pragmatic, they would have not re-signed Yuki, because if they're not going to move him up, I know the Honda money's...
They have to keep it because of the Honda thing.
I know the Honda money's there, but if they were being 100% pragmatic, they would make their decision on Yuki and either keep him for Red Bull or remove him now.
Yeah.
Remove Daniel and get 2 young drivers in that new seat, because they need to, as you say, start prepping.
They don't have 2 young drivers.
But they need to start churning them now. It doesn't matter,
But it's not good. They're not good enough. They're not surviving in Formula 2 right now. Pepe Marti had a disaster.
Look outside. F3, F4, start getting people ready.
They're 15. It takes time.
No, but my point is jump them to F2 or, get them to F3,
we're going to see
whatever.
that. I think we're going to see that with Lindblad. He's, I think, second or...
Get Antonelli.
He's maybe leading into... he's in Formula 3 right now. He might jump to RB, by the way, if he wins the Formula 3 championship. Marco talked about it. He said that because he's 16, and Marco specifically said that since now we can get drivers in Formula 1 at 17, he might have a chance. So if he wins the Formula 3, he's jumping in RB.
This is the thing though, like if that was still the junior team, which is why I think they need to do this now, like get Ricciardo out, test Lawson, and then start getting that team back to being a junior team. Yeah. Because if they don't find a new Verstappen, I'm genuinely, I said in my video, I think that there is a good chance that if they don't get a new Verstappen now, right, or in the next year, if Max Verstappen goes and they don't have another Max Verstappen lined up, at least one who, he might not be a Max Verstappen, but at least one who looks like it could be the next one. I think that's the nail in the coffin of Horner at Red Bull, because essentially, unless they go into 2026 with a dominant car and a dominant engine, which is, I think, unlikely.
Highly unlikely.
Like, I think they could have a dominant car. Pierre Vacher and stuff do good work, but a dominant engine as well.
It's a very
and also in these regulations, I don't think there will be a dominant engine. I think they'll all be relatively close.
Marco also talked about it. Same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been the one who've basically been.
I've been saying this for months. I think we've been saying it on this podcast since the start.
Far too many times. Yeah. And even Marco said the same thing, that the gap is not going to be much. It's not going to be what happened in 2014. So it's going to come down to the chassis, and active aerodynamics is going to be a big thing.
Which is why I think whoever gets Newey could be in a really good position, because he's worked with that as well in the past.
Martin, I really hope they get him.
Yeah,
I just want Alonso in a championship fight so that he can get his due credit which he deserves.
Yeah,
finally.
honestly, if the last thing I'll say on that is if Red Bull had their junior team like they did before, like if they had it like they had before, they would be in such a better situation right now. Because if they had been churning, they would have been in a position to, like, for example, at the end of 2022, was it? Or no, 2021, when the whole Oscar Piastri thing was ongoing, right? Mm-hmm. And Oscar wasn't getting the seat with Alpine that year, before any of that McLaren stuff had have happened, Red Bull would have been in the situation to say, we'll give you a seat right now in our fucking second car. Now, I'm not saying they would have done it, but my point is they would have been in that situation. When an Antonelli starts coming up through the ranks, again, they're in a situation to say, we have that. And by not having the junior team, a lot of young drivers are going to start signing for Mercedes and Ferrari because they know it's like Sergio Perez is there for a long time. You've brought Daniel Ricciardo back. My chances of getting a seat with you are no better than they are with Ferrari or Mercedes. Yeah. And that used to be their edge for young drivers. They don't have it anymore. And that's it's real
weird.
Problem.
It's very weird. And you know what it seems is that Red Bull has grown a bit complacent since 2021, 2022, where a lot of things that actually help them stand out, they don't. Mm-hmm. And maybe in the background, Horner has realized it and is trying to put the house back in order. And it's going to take some time. But the next few steps are going to be crucial. Who he puts in place of Checo. Again, Checo is out. I don't see him after the summer break. Wherever...
I'd be very surprised,
Yeah, and whoever he puts in place of Checo is going to be the first indication of where Red Bull is.
Do you think that's why Sainz and stuff is holding out as well? Clearly, because as soon as
Sainz has been declined, I think.
No, I'm not saying for that, but I think that the moment Checo gets removed, that again like tilts the driver market once again, because that is Red Bull moving around, and also if Ricciardo doesn't work out and they start to think that maybe Max could leave, then. Like, I'm not saying Sainz is an option, but if Horner loses faith that Max is thinking about long term, then surely he thinks about it.
Okay, if you're Christian Horner, Max leaves. Max tells you that he's going to Mercedes for 2025. Who is the first driver you call?
First driver?
Yeah,
Norris, first but he won't accept. It's Norris, Russell, Leclerc, but Fernando Alonso as well, and Fernando Alonso would accept it. Obviously, the reason I didn't say Fernando is just I don't know. I don't know why I didn't think about Alonso actually straight away there. I guess because I'm thinking about younger drivers long term, because they'll need a long term solution, and maybe Alonso is not quite on their books for that point. And also, I think I said in the past that if Horner wants stability, he's not calling Alonso for stability. So
I mean, basically, you call Horner to incinerate the team, not to develop it. So he might not be the best.
I just don't know. Like, I think if Max leaves the team and
who is the first driver you want in your team if Max is gone?
I think Norris right now, personally. I think he's right at that perfect point where all of the things that people said about Max in 2020, 2021, all of those things are now true of Norris, because it's not like Norris hasn't got the pace. It's not like Norris can't win. It's questions around immaturity or ruthlessness or all these different things. Obviously, Max didn't have the ruthlessness question, but you know what I mean? Like, there are these questions about, is he the right driver to win championships? And I feel like Norris is that one where, like, even Leclerc and Russell, I guess the problem is probably just a bias of where the car is, and this happens all the time. Whereas,
I think the second best would be Leclerc. If Leclerc has the right surroundings around him, he'll deliver. He does not have. He's never had it at Ferrari. To be very frank.
I think Russell would be a really good shout, but I just don't know if it's the right fit for Red Bull.
I thought Russell would be a good shot, but I've seen him lose to Lewis quite a few times and considerably. And if he's doing that in the third year, it shows that, again, Lewis is brilliant, but Russell should not be in that position.
Russell should be... Well, I suppose Lewis is ahead of Russell now in the standings, isn't he, after the...
But again, that's a lot of unreliability and Silverstone, a couple of races back as well. So that has played a big
role. In terms of in fairness to Russell, in terms of performance, if we look over the whole season, Russell is still
much better. There's no comparison on that.
But like, if you're talking about drivers who are actually available for Red Bull, it's Sainz is the only real option. Like, I mean, they could buy Alonso out, right? But Alonso is very much... The problem with Alonso is very much a stopgap situation, right? Sainz you could actually hire for like a long term until you find another Vettel or Verstappen. You've got like a competent driver.
Sainz and Max don't gel.
I'm saying we're saying if Max leaves. I mean if Max leaves.
Okay.
Right. Whereas if Max leaves, the other thing about Max leaving, if Max leaves, I don't think Norris, Leclerc or Russell goes there because surely their thinking is something's not right here.
I think Leclerc does. I think Leclerc does.
Yeah.
You see, after Silverstone, he was at a breaking point.
Yes, that is. Then he's been broken so many times.
I shared that video of there's this video of Joe Biden where I think five or six people are dancing next to him.
You're obsessed with Joe Biden right now.
Yeah, I mean these are his last few days in the sun. After that, he's basically he's obsolete. So just feel bad for the guy.
I can't believe you said that about Lewis Hamilton, or at least that's how I'm going to clip it.
Yeah. Anyways, look, if I am in Horner's place, I'd rather put the driver that is on top of my list is Leclerc because I've seen him beat Max pretty much handily.
Yeah. It's a fair point,
in similar conditions, and I think the potential is there. Plus, the kind of nurturing you can expect Horner to provide it.
I don't think you're. I think even if you thought Norris would be better, I don't think you're getting Norris right now. I think he's got his team. You know. He's got a team that is comfortable, and they currently have
maybe they could go for
a faster car. Oscar could be a good shout, because Oscar probably knows like he's not the lead driver there, and it's going to be very hard for him to be the lead driver there.
Oscar is one driver that is going to be on the radar for probably all of the teams because he is someone who is brilliantly fast but also pliable. Who will be willing to cede position with team leader.
And I think is only going to get better. Like, we have not seen the best of Oscar yet.
Yeah.
Like that's what's scary for Norris, right? Like how good Piastri is. Yeah.
And by the way, McLaren has another great driver, Gabriel Bortoleto. He's also coming up. He was the F3 champion.
Yeah. He's very, very good.
He's very good. Yeah. And maybe Red Bull go for him. If not Isaac Hadjar, he's also good. But again, the problem with Red Bull right now is it's such a clusterfuck. They have to find a makeshift thing. Mostly Daniel Ricciardo works for now. But for 2025, they have to start being aggressive in the driver market. Mm-hmm. They've been very, 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 very laid back because they had Max. I don't think they have the insurance of having Max anymore. They have to be very aggressive and they need someone to back him up.
I personally think from 2026, Red Bull is going to start, unfortunately, becoming like we've seen with like McLaren and Williams and so on, where they kind of just start to drop off and eventually kind of get out of contention. Because I think even the behind the scenes, like the problem is when you've got a situation where half of the company wants one thing and half of the company wants another, it can last for a while, but it's eventually untenable. Like to win in F1, you need everything lined up perfectly. Yeah. And we've seen even with Mercedes, like when everything isn't perfect, look how quickly you fall back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think Red Bull now has 2025, and I from 2026. I still don't know if
they have 2025. I mean,
this is the thing. No, my point. They'll at least be in the fight for 2025. Yeah. I think that's a done deal. Whether they win or not is a different question. But I think they will be in the fight. Yeah. But I don't know if, like, at best, I think from 2026 they're Ferrari post 2009. At worst, they become a Williams in the early 2000s, where they kind of slowly fall off. And Williams was like that with BMW as well.
Yeah, I would have said the same thing, but the reason why I slightly hesitate when it comes to this is, well, two things. First, Horner has taken over as CEO, and is slowly Red Bull Racing is slowly becoming its own entity, its own singular entity. When that happens, the man, again, give credit to Adrian Newey, every single guy, fine. The main architect was Horner, and he's still there.
Yeah. A lot of people will talk about Helmut Marko, but Helmut Marko's biggest contribution to that team, in my opinion, was was bringing Horner to the team. Because Vettel and Verstappen
Yeah.
are nothing without bringing... He brought Horner to the team. And if he doesn't bring Horner, you don't have Newey, which means you don't have Vettel, you don't have Verstappen. Because Vettel was getting so good. If Red Bull didn't have Horner in 2010, Vettel was leaving for somewhere else. In fact,
For sure.
I would go as this is going to sound ridiculous. If Helmut Marko doesn't bring Horner in, Vettel leaves pretty soon after 2010, and Vettel goes to replace
Vettel will be a BMW driver, right? Vettel was a BMW driver already. He debuted with BMW.
Yeah, sure. But you know where he ends up?
Ferrari. Where?
Mercedes, clearly.
In which year?
Because
In 2010
Schumacher would have been
Mercedes.
pushing for Vettel to go to Mercedes. He's German. He was one of the best drivers. Vettel ends with 7 world champions, 8 world championships right now. Like literally, if Helmut Marko didn't bring Horner into Red Bull, Lewis Hamilton probably has 1 championship right now.
Yeah.
Maybe 2. That is insane. Well, actually, no. Lewis Hamilton probably has 2 or 3 because McLaren might not have been... Anyway, there's a lot of ifs here, but things
Only one.
change.
I mean, 12, 13 again, Alonso would have been a world champion.
Actually, Ferrari would... Alonso would probably have 4 world championships.
Yeah.
Actually,
World would have been
that
in
is
fifth
exactly
place.
what would have happened. Alonso would have won 2010, 2011, 2012. No, 2011, no.
Not 2011 was Button. 2011 would have been Button.
Button,
And,
11 or 10 would have been Alonso because he got fucked on that at the end, which he wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Or 2010, yeah, because Red Bull wouldn't have been there. So it would have been Alonso. 2013, who was behind?
Mercedes.
So it would have been Vettel.
Yeah.
So Vettel would have
been Vettel.
Vettel would have been an 8-time world champion. Assuming that Rosberg beats him in
9-time world
2016.
champion, right? No,
It
I don't
depends.
assume that.
Yeah.
But Rosberg would not have been there, right? There's another factor because Vettel would have replaced Rosberg after 2010.
You're
What
right. He would have been a long.
afterwards,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
the hell knows? So again,
Actually, in that situation, maybe it's Rosberg is gone and it's Vettel and Hamilton for all of those years.
I don't think they'll hire two alphas. They won't do that. They'll just hire another Valtteri Bottas. Probably it would have been Valtteri Bottas because Toto represented him, so that would have played a role.
That's a crazy
Anyways,
thing to think about, though. Yeah, but sorry, it was
we've
just
gone on
insane
a
to
very
think
random tangent.
Yeah, that was a very random. But it is interesting to think. I'm doing a Wheel Sports video about this next because that's an interesting timeline to
It's a
think
very
about.
interesting topic.
Yeah.
What if
Helmut Marko
never hired Horner?
Yeah, like how different F1 would have been. But yeah,
I mean,
Helmut Marko's
anyways,
biggest contribution was hiring Horner, and I think that's
until
what
Horner
you were
is
saying
there.
there. I was just going to say what you were saying there is interesting because if in 2026 everything goes tits up, right? It's very clear that the Austrian side of Red Bull is only interested in it from a financial standpoint, not from a racing standpoint, and the Thai side loves it from a marketing standpoint, but I think only cares as long as it's winning. As soon as it stops winning, I think they'll stop caring. So
Possibly.
I could see a situation where Horner gets backing from a group of people and says, look, we want to take this over. And they go to Red Bull and say, look, we'll buy it out and we'll give you a guaranteed title sponsorship for 3 or 4 years. So you get all of the gains with none of the investment.
But do you think they are that? Look, the Thai again. Right now, the situation is that the Thai side has been part of the team since 2000, whatever, since the beginning. The Austrian part is the new one.
Maybe the Thai
they've
side
seen
and
the bad
Horner
days
back it
and
out.
the good days.
Yeah. So maybe
Right.
the Thai side back Horner and they just buy out the. Yeah.
Plus, the biggest thing is Red Bull Racing is now a racing company. It's not simply. I mean, they have their own hypercar. That entity is not going anywhere. And Red Bull
I suppose
is
they
making
have the
a ton of
engines
money.
and everything.
Everything, man. I mean,
I suppose, you have to wonder then, does Red Bull become like a proper kind of, like almost
They
McLaren, but like become a proper McLaren over the next 20,
Just
30
wait
years?
for some time. In a few years, I'm damn sure if the way MotoGP is going, they will have their own bike. They already have an association with KTM.
Now that you say it, actually, this is exactly like McLaren because McLaren had the McLaren F1, the original F1, which was Gordon Murray, I think, right? And it was...
No. Gordon Murray came in 1980s.
No, but I mean the actual McLaren F1 road car. Because
was it Gordon Murray?
Or was I'll tell you now. It was Gordon Murray.
Impressive.
Gordon Murray convinced Ron Dennis to create a road car, like a track and road car.
Yeah.
And then Gordon Murray is no longer part of Red Bull or of McLaren. So it's a very similar idea of Adrian Newey convinces this. They start building their own engines. They start, all of this comes together. Maybe we will see a situation where Red Bull goes more down like Horner becomes kind of ahead of a...
I mean, they already have. We just don't treat it as such, but it has. Red Bull Racing is a different entity because Marco already had a contract with GmbH, Red Bull GmbH, the main parent company. But now he has signed an extension with the racing company because they are different entities. Again, what happens in the future? Again, the problem with Red Bull is I think it's basically a typical fan mentality where every time there's a team that has a dip, we tend to think that everything will fall off. But there is one key difference I see between Red Bull and between Mercedes was not on top of everything when it comes to... They slacked off when it came to during their peak years, and even Toto talked about it later that they never really focused very highly on pit stops. That is why they tended to be very slow compared to others. Now they are slowly getting back to it. Their strategies were not top notch, and that's why you see every season you see at least 2 to 3 debacles from Mercedes. It was very common. It used to happen with them. Red Bull is not that. You look at Red Bull and you try to look at if there is a team and there are certain check boxes that needs to be ticked, be it the pit stops, be it the strategy, be it the engine, tire management, the senior management, whatever, every box is ticked, actually ticked. That team is basically, and again, that's down to Honda.
Well, I just think it's going to come down to a simple fact of when a team really falls off, like McLaren had its tough times, and then it got back, and then it went away. Now McLaren is a complete, it's basically a different.
It's
company,
not the same,
No, but from the 90s to kind of coming back into 2000s, it was keeping that one person at the top, and that's going to be the real question. It's like, Toto, in fairness, I was concerned that Toto would leave and Mercedes would go away. It seems like Toto has kind of taken more control of Mercedes, and maybe Mercedes can come back. There's kind of... I was very like Mercedes is going to fall apart because it seemed it was going the same way as every other team that's fallen apart. So it really depends. If Horner can keep hold of this and keep that idea.
That Allison has been to Toto what Newey was to Horner to an extent. Where
by
he's
bringing
brought
him
back. Things have started falling in place.
The question now is,
just how it works.
The question now is, can Horner do the same with Pierre Vacher and Balbo? Or does he need someone else?
If you look at the reports and whatever they've been saying, according to them, it's basically Pierre Vacher who has been handling the entire thing since forever.
No, I think, look, if you're talking day to day in the actual build up, the problem is because Newey left, what's going to happen is the usual, where Newey will get the credit for the dominant year. Well, Newey will get the credit for last year, and Pierre Vacher will get the blame for how badly it's going right now. Or I say badly.
It's already happening, right?
They're still leading the championship, but you know what I mean. It's like Whereas that's not the case at all. Like Pierre Vacher deserves just as much credit for last year, if not more, in reality. But anyway,
I really hope he gets credit throughout his career, because again, even right now, he's being approached relentlessly by almost everyone.
Newey just will get a lot of credit because Newey left to join another team at the exact right time to do what Newey does best, which is Newey sees the regulations perfectly. So if Newey goes to Aston and Aston wins, it will be that Newey magic dust just because they got him at the perfect time. Whereas if you hire a Newey in 2027, I don't think it makes that big of a difference. I
think
you know what I mean.
The biggest thing is it's something that has agitated me a lot. 2010 to 2013, Vettel won 4 titles. It was a Newey car. 2014 to 2020 or whatever, Lewis won the titles. No one knows who the fuck the designer was. And now
it was Mike
we are
Elliott,
back to
right?
Mike Elliott, James Allison, Paddy Lowe, all these guys. And again, we're back to the same thing.
I was
Max Verstappen
joking,
wins the
but
title.
anyway,
I know,
yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
still, for the uninitiated. And now when Max is winning, again, it's a new car. And now Max is not winning. He can't win without a new car.
It's a Pierre
the
Vacher car.
same nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also, he can't win, by the way, apparently. And he
It's a
can't
team.
drive.
It's a whole team effort.
People don't understand it. And by the way, Adrian Newey, after 1999 until 2010, he did not win even a single title. 11-year drought. Why? Because
It's a team
things didn't work
effort.
precisely. And no one wants to understand that. What Red Bull gave him, he stayed there for almost 2 decades.
They
You
gave
have
him
to understand
flexibility,
that.
complete
They gave him
flexibility.
everything. Every fucking thing. Even a few things we might not even know of. But anyways, so
Yeah.
the point is, you have to understand the fact that it's a team. And anyways, we've gone on
Yeah.
too many tangents.
Let's try and wrap this up in the next 10 minutes now, because otherwise we'll go on
precisely.
forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to the
And I have to
extended
go and
edition of the Breaking Bias podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We might have to start doing that as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyways, enough of the whatever happened in the previous weekend.
So
Now,
do we have any? Let's do quick fire. Do we have any questions or anything to end on?
let me see if we've not gone through all of them.
Why did Ferrari put Charles on a medium in the final stint? Because they're absolute morons as usual. I don't know if we need to talk about this because it's just for.
Is there any... by the way, you know what's the funniest part? They didn't even talk about it in the debrief. No one even asked them. And
It's the assumption.
first of all, it's the assumption it's Ferrari. You know what's the brilliance of Ferrari? They will let their driver drive around, extend his stint on a slower medium tire, worn out tire. He gains a 7-lap offset, and then they don't even use a 7-lap offset. They pitted him at the same time as Lewis was pitting, and Lewis had a harder tire. He had a medium tire, and both of them on the same life. He was never going to overtake him. The 7-lap offset, which he could have easily used to get a podium. I actually think Charles could have been on the podium if the strategy was right. They screwed it up.
You can just put
one talking about
Ferrari
it.
at the end. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I hope Lewis is.
So-
I wonder. I like. The thing is, a lot of people are saying like, and I was guilty of it at first. Going, I wonder does Lewis regret now the idea of going to Ferrari? I gave my reasons for why and why not, but I do think he's probably not worried about the car and stuff because those things can change over a season. But surely he's looking at the strategy and going, "Oh, this is going to be problematic." You know, like this is going to be a shit show.
I mean, his biggest
So
worry would
is
be-
our answer just Ferrari?
It's Ferrari.
I
mean,
yeah.
and Coffeehead is actually a Lewis Hamilton fan, so probably that's why he asked.
Yeah,
And,
just Ferrari.
yeah. Is Red Bull
Mobile
to-
chicane.
Yes.
I think we answered all the other ones of coffee anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're starting
Mobile
to get
chicane,
first
who
sign of some
died
cracks.
during our last podcast, said we're starting to see the first signs of cracks in the Aston Alonso partnership. If the same kind of form continues next year, what do you guys think Fernando will do? Stick, twist, or call it a day? My answer on that is, if you were talking about him only having a contract for next year and he was seeing the cracks this year, I could see him not extending and calling it a day. But I will say one thing, that Alonso has had enough. This is where I think Alonso will think. He has had enough bad decisions over the years where he's left a team or joined a team just as things either go well or turn to shit, that I think that he will see out this contract regardless, because I think if he leaves even if 2025 is an absolute shit show, right? It's utter garbage. I think he stays for 2026, because imagine how horrible he will feel if he leaves at the end of 2025 and Aston
I
somehow
could
have
almost
the
see it happening.
And this is the thing, it would be absolute complete Alonso if he left at the end of 2025 and they have a car so good that Stroll wins the championship in 2026. He will never forgive himself. So
I will never
think
forgive myself for watching the sport if Stroll wins the championship.
if Stroll wins the
Forget
championship,
about
I will stop watching. But yeah,
We're
so
shutting this down.
I think I can see where Mobile Chicane's coming from, absolutely. And if you haven't subscribed to his channel, you should. He's a legend and a member of our podcasting community.
Yeah, he died last time.
He died last time. I think, yeah, so you should subscribe to his channel to help his people out now that he's dead. Yeah. But no, I don't think he leaves at the end of next year, because I think that would be, Like, why would he leave going into a new?
I think the whole point is right now. I think where mobile is coming from is the last few races. Alonso has sounded as disinterested as probably anyone has ever
Yeah,
been.
which is fair. Yeah.
Yeah, and when it comes to that, ideally, if I'm Alonso, I'll stick around until 2026 because again, there are rumors of Adrian Newey coming in, and if there are rumors, then these conversations have been already told to Alonso, and whatever is going through right now, he's going through the motions. You can see if Stroll is beating him, there's something wrong.
They've also got, even without Newey, they've got Cardile coming in. They've got some changes happening.
New wind tunnel and the facilities are amazing.
Yeah.
The point is, if I'm Alonso, I would stay, but knowing Alonso, I will not be surprised if in between
Yes,
now
that
and
is fair, yeah.
2025 he leaves
Yeah.
and basically calls it a
or
day.
pisses the team off so much that
Yeah.
they take their option not to keep him for 2026.
I mean, he has an option till 2027, right? It's a 3-year contract, if I'm not
It's a
wrong.
2+1, I thought. No, Or
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
not. I don't
So
know.
yeah, you're right.
Oh,
So
sorry,
it's
you're right.
25,
Yes,
26 and 27.
Yes, sorry. I was thinking next year was his second year, but no, that the extension was made this year. So
Yes,
yeah, that makes
yes.
sense. I just can't see him. Like, this is the end of his career. If this was Alonso, like in 2012 or something, or like in that
He
period,
would have already pissed off everyone.
Yes, yeah. So he would have left already, I think. But given I think he knows this is his last contract, I
Yeah.
think he stays until 2026. And if 2026 is a shit show, I think he just goes, I'm not taking up the option and goes. But yeah, I think those are all the questions. And that is a
just
2.5 hour
Ronan's
podcast.
Ronan had the question: who's the best choice from Yuki, Ricciardo, and everyone? I think for you, it's
We already
Daniel,
kind of said
right?
it. Yeah, I think.
Even for me,
Yeah.
for now, I'd put Daniel in.
For
and,
now, I will like to qualify though. I'm not saying of the whole options of all of the grid, Ricardo is nowhere near the best choice. I just mean in terms of who is the most logical choice that they can get right now. It's Ricardo, I think. Yeah.
Look, if it was up to me, I'll put Nico Hülkenberg because I'm a huge fan. But that's not up to me.
That would be.
I just
Yeah.
if that happens, it would be great. But I've given up hope. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Daniel is the best choice at this stage, and probably look. Imagine if the old Daniel comes back. I mean, he was fun to watch. Every time he won a race, it was there was a feel good thing about the whole environment that happened around it. Let's hope it happens. I mean, anyways, okay.
End of the podcast,
this all is done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to again, since we have the Belgian Grand Prix this time around, let's do a quick fire thing. Your top 3.
I'm gonna say it's Max, Norris, and Piastri. I just have a feeling that this race is going to be one where the
rain is
no
also on the horizon.
no, I can't say that because this is the only place where they're going to give the penalties of engine penalties to Max. So I'm going to say it's
I was
Norris.
about to say that.
Yeah, Norris, Piastri. Who's going to be
Lewis.
next after that? Because it's not going to be Perez. Like I'm not a moron. And if Max, like if this was any other situation, I would say Max, even with engine penalties, could come through and get a podium. But I think the field is so tight now that that's not going to happen if he's especially if he starts right at the back.
But there's rain as well. Apparently, rain is also on the horizon.
I don't know if the Mercedes is quick enough in a straight line. Ferrari could be quite good in a straight line.
Ferrari is
there.
not. It's not.
So it's going to be
struggling.
Okay, Norris, Piastri, Russell.
I'm going with Norris, Piastri, Verstappen. I think
if
he makes his way
if
through
Max
the field.
doesn't have an engine penalty this weekend, I'm going to be very pissed off because
If
I
he
would have
does
said
not
Max
have it-
first.
I think he would have because this is probably the best place to get it done.
Yeah, I can't see anywhere else. I know this
Yeah.
is going to be one of their stronger tracks in terms of doing damage limitation because it's either that or you basically consign yourself to not getting any points in Singapore and just take all of your engine penalty there. But that's too late in the season.
Plus, that doesn't make much sense, right? Because
No.
here the loss would be like 5 or 6 points. There it would be much bigger. But again,
He's getting into the points regardless, I think, in this.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
It's I think mostly I'm going with him on the podium. I thought about Ferrari, but Ferrari has for a very rare case that they're actually struggling on the straight line. So maybe not.
I hope they fix that before Monza. Anyway, Jesus.
Anyway, I think we've went on for a while, right? This is the longest podcast.
Longest, yeah. Spa will be back to normal. We'll do an hour and a half at Spa.
Yeah.
Okay.
We even started late. Okay, by the way,
thanks for watching.
And
if you've made
drop
it here,
a comment. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
By the way, if you're not offended by the nonsense that we've spewed out, I mean, you really have high tolerance. Even we don't have that much. Thanks for watching, by the way, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Where's the stop button? Oh, here we go.